Hello, you are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
Two brothers looking at all things rugby through the lens of Leinster and Ireland. And this is show number 88, and it's a gap week, but it's been a fantastic week, or 2 weeks even, of Six Nations rugby. And we're going to start the show by looking back on all the action from last weekend and kind of going through each game and the talking points for each team for both, or for all the games I should say. And then after that, obviously we have no games to preview this week, but we will be looking, kind of switching gears to the Southern Hemisphere and looking ahead to the Super Rugby AU, which starts this weekend, and then ahead to Super Rugby Aotearoa, which starts the weekend after, I believe, as
That's
well.
right,
So
yeah.
we're going to look through that. Then we're going to stick with club rugby as well, look a bit more at some of the domestic European rugby that's going on. We'll also look at the top league in Japan, which gets underway soon as well. We'll look ahead to that. And we'll finish the show, as we always do, with the rugby news of the week.
Absolutely, yes. We are a little late this week, I know. We were hoping to get in a little earlier, but the reviews, it's better late than never. For all of those who want it, it'll be our takes a little after they were sort of front page news, the games of last week, but it's allowed us to digest, and it's no harm allowing us to digest after Ireland lose a big game.
That's true.
Sometimes the sort of emotive feeling of being a fan takes over from any kind of analysis or anything. You just upset.
Yes.
And two tough losses for Ireland has us in that mind, but we managed to unplug that and recharge our sort of general rugby loving brains and just remember and go over what was just an awesome weekend of Six Nations rugby, one of the best weekends we've had in a while. I would venture to say to go as far as to say since the pandemic started, I don't think there's been a better weekend of rugby.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it that thoroughly. I think the games were brilliant, especially the Scotland-Wales game, and I'm looking forward to digging into them for us. And listen, if you do like what you're seeing and hearing from us, if you enjoy the show, please be sure to like the video. It helps a lot if you can. And comments are great as well. We're getting good chat going in the comment sections.
Right,
generally speaking, we like to see that. Like to see some strong opinions. Always keep it respectful, but it's always great to hear your thoughts as well. And the usual other stuff. Subscribe if you haven't already. And
bell and all of those other things. We don't normally
jazz.
give the bell the shout out, but the bell means that you get notified. So you can give that a
just
click
in
as
case
well.
it wouldn't be like us, but just in case we were to disappear for a month and then re-upload again out of nowhere, it might be helpful to have that bell ring if you're interested in hearing from us.
That has been known to happen before. In the interest of clipping on, we are going to crack into the meat of this show. Obviously, as I said, we have no games to preview, but we are going to look back on the weekend of Six Nations rugby that was, and as Daragh was alluding to, what a round two we were treated to. Just fantastic. Like it was really everything you could want from Six Nations rugby games in terms of just the atmosphere is the wrong word because there was no crowd there, but there was palpable tension in lots of the games. It went down to the wire a lot of the time, as well as just the overall quality of the rugby. There were some stellar scores.
There was a level of intensity on the field as well as the quality. Like I love to see, we'll get into just the response of offensive rugby to what's happened last year in particular, where they're running last year simultaneously in the Autumn Nations Cup and in the Tri-Nations, just defenses were dominating all over, and games were being won by defenses, and even without the Springboks involved, every team was becoming little Springbok disciples, kicking the ball and trying to defend and trying to be mean and strong. And to see just the response, I mean, we had on Saturday the two games 15 tries between the two games, 18 all over the weekend, an average of 6 a game.
Brilliant.
At that top level test rugby, I mean, it's just what you want to see. So many tries scored in first and second phase off set pieces.
Yes, delightful.
Exactly what we were hoping to see, because that's where the defensive lines could only be so effective when you've all the forwards tied together, and teams are realising that, and offensive coaches have struck back, and it's been just awesome to see. Likewise, I just think on a level with the no crowds, I think that the energy that teams brought in the last little while has been noticeably different to what the energy was in going back to autumn, but even in club rugby, just ever since the stadiums have been empty, you felt that there was something missing. But as 60 minutes came in that Scotland-Wales game, and both teams were just giving it their absolute all, both in attack and defence, and you could just feel the stakes, and you could feel every player it mattering enormously to them and working as hard as they possibly can to make it happen for their team and their country. And it was just everything you want to see in Six Nations rugby. It was brilliant. I really divorcing yourself from the Ireland disappointment. It was just brilliant.
Brilliant rugby.
Weekend.
Oh, top notch. And in fact, one of the stats that I thought revealed a lot of about your point about just offensive rugby taking back over, but also just, it's a rare enough stat, in rarefied air in Six Nations talk, because it's been a few years since we've seen it. There was a carries per offload stat that caught my eye, which is the average number of carries before a team offloads, which is kind of interesting, and it tells, you'd imagine, like, the story of how teams want to use the ball. Top of the table is France, no surprise there, averaging 9 carries before they offload the ball, which is, to be honest, that's crazy levels of just joie de vivre and jouer that you love to see from France. It's great to see them kind of go back to their roots as far as offensive footy is concerned. They had kind of deviated from it for the past few years.
They're playing a smarter brand as well, where they're doing it in the right areas of the field, kicking when they need to, moving the ball when they need to, but it's still very much offensive minded.
Yes, and, indeed.
It comes from great tracking runs as well. They're in sync with each other, and they understand their identity and their mindset, and it helps enormously.
Yeah, attacking rugby at the core, and then or a bit of a gap, I should say, before we get to Wales on 19 carries per offload, but still Wales
the other team with 2 from 2.
This is it, 2 from 2. Both teams sitting atop the table in terms of after the first 2 weeks, and they're the 2 teams that offload the most, and there's no surprise there. It's offensive footy is what's winning out. And then in third place with just one more 20 per offload is Italy. Italy getting in there, and we've known that. We've been watching them kind of work that wide shape in over the last year. We see them trying to play an ambitious style. They went to Twickenham to try and play a bit of rugby. They grabbed a nice try early doors as well. So it's good to see them putting on offensive footy as well and growing their acumen in terms of just being able to distribute. It wasn't too long ago that an Italian team couldn't get it from one side of the pitch to the other without the ball going to deck. Truly. That seems to have changed. Then further back we have Scotland with 31 passes before an offload, which is a bit more phase play, kind of building things, trying to hold the ball.
They had that game against England, which was very, they managed to try in it, but it was very kicky. It was very kick heavy. It was very power oriented. I thought against Wales they did mix it up nicely, but they're using their power as well, and using Finn Russell to unlock defences a lot of the time as well.
And Stewie Hogg's boot as well.
Exactly.
Things like
so
that.
It's just a different approach, but they're still attacking quite well.
Yeah. And then further back, as they were always going to be after that week 1 showing, we have England, 36 carries per offload, and I suppose, well, if you're going to kick the ball a lot of the time, you're not going to rack up these great stats. They did improve those stats going in week 2, obviously having played Italy and running in the 6 tries that they did, but 36 carries per offload, probably a little high in terms of what you'd normally associate with Eddie Jones's England. Like, it was when they're in their pump, a lot of offloads from tight forwards. You think Billy Vunipola getting the hands free after knocking a few guys over and all that.
They kind of different kind of offloading to what you might see France do, where like you look back to the build up to their try they scored in the weekend, where it was just so instinctive. Like Marchand was picking an inside line, Dupont was picking the inside line inside him. Dupont just flicks one because he knows Pinot is in that open space. Very instinctive, very sort of, it's the mindset of the team to attack, so run where the space is.
Exactly.
For England, it was always a bit more structured. Like there was an idea to find a shot, the soft shoulder, and run around the corner. We saw a little bit of that creeping back in this week, and I think that stat is probably inflated by what happened the first week where they didn't attack at all.
That's right.
I think. I mean,
as the tournament goes on, you'll maybe see that stat come down a little bit more in line with what we're used to seeing from England, for sure. But the one that's really telling, and it's a tear shed for us, we who are Irish, who love offensive and attacking rugby. Ireland are averaging 54 carries per 1 offload, and scoring only 2 tries in the tournament so far. It's like there's a correlation there that's very clear. It's not just that they're not looking for offloads. Every now and then the guy who's carrying is looking for an offload, but there's just no one running the aggressive, attacking, instinctive line like what you saw with France and Dupont just floating one over to Pinot.
Opposite. They run lines to maintain possession, and they've dominated possession so far. And they don't run lines necessarily to penetrate and to make tries happen. And ultimately, well, we're seeing it's a flawed tactic, and we'll talk about Ireland in greater detail later on. But that is a revealing stat. It is more or less, with the exception of Italy, is parallel to how things have gone so far.
Yeah, indeed.
Perhaps a telling one. Good to see offensive rugby prove telling. Just in response to what happened last year. I suspect we'll see a response from defence coaches yet. There's always that chess match.
Yes, that's true.
But so far in the tournament, offensive coaches playing a blinder, 1-1, with the exception of one. 1-1 but one.
Yes.
We'll move on. We'll get more in depth with the teams when we're just looking back on the games themselves. The other just bit of news that we might touch on before we get into the previews, a couple of bits. The first is obviously France. I'm sure you've all heard that they're in isolation now after a couple of coaches, including Fabien Galthié, has tested positive for COVID-19. Happy to see,
convenient.
Happy to see Galthié himself tweeted out that he's like feeling okay.
Good to hear.
And mentally still doing prep from home for the Scotland game.
Sure.
It's obviously a bad a bad thing to happen at a bad time for a French side that are just looking to finally get some silverware, and they're in pole position to do so, and this is definitely a scare.
It's definitely a spanner in the works, but ideally, like they've tested and they've found it, and hopefully they can isolate and get the games ahead. And the fact that there are 2 gap weeks means that a reschedule is possible.
It's great. It's perfect. First of all, that this falls on the gap week. Like in terms of silver linings, obviously you don't want this to happen, but if this falls on a gap week, it's possible, if hopefully the right protocols were taken and teams were appropriately potted, that some of the coaches that it hasn't spread through the squad, that everybody's isolated, and that maybe after 10 days, if no symptoms remain for the guys, they can get back in and start training again, and then maybe the match can go ahead as scheduled. And if that can't happen, the gap week that's there the next week seems like a perfect weekend for it, and hopefully you would think they'd be all clear.
Or you could just do it next autumn.
2 weeks time. Or you could do it in the autumn. Well, the one thing we don't want to see happen is a 28-0 or a 0-all draw. Both for the France-Scotland game, it's been such a great competition. It is the biggest deal without exception in European rugby, and it's the one that the fans pay attention to. It's important for the selling of the game
and the integrity of the tournament.
And the integrity of the tournament, and by extension the game, in a way that top tours games and Pro 14 games
or
aren't,
Nations
because
Cup
this is
games,
where the eyes of sporting media and sporting fans are on us more than any other. It's vital that the tournament maintains its integrity as best it can. So like if you have to push the tournament back an extra week, I would love to see the club organisations be lenient in that scenario. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe you have to wait till June or something ridiculous.
Well,
but let's hope.
Hopefully not.
But certainly, no 28-0s, no 0-all draws.
That seems like
it's too tight at the top as well. The guys who get the walkover would probably go and win the tournament.
Indeed, and then that would be a sham in terms of if that were the case. It would just be a black mark. But hopefully not. Touch wood and all that. And we're wishing obviously all those French staff well in their recovery, and hopefully we'll see them pitch side
nobody
soon.
else tests positive, and everybody gets the all clear.
And the other bit of news from that week as well is obviously Zander Fagerson, following that red card incident, he will now miss the rest of the tournament due to that 5-week ban. So they will be without Zander.
There's been a bit of controversy about that. We might talk about the incident in more detail when we're looking back at the game, but I mean, we all know it was a red card clean out. What was bizarre about it, there's a few people positing that this just doesn't make sense, because he's actually got a week extra ban as compared to Peter O'Mahony's, which was unequivocally worse.
Yes.
There is that truth to it, and I definitely think that Peter O'Mahony got I think double the amount that he's serving, but got his ban cut in half because of good behavior. Remorseful and good behaviour. It's just like it's his second red card of the season.
Yeah.
So it's like, when do you ever not give them the good behaviour thing? It seems like it's every time they get it, except for this one, because apparently Zander, and in just a baffling, in something I just don't understand, he's refused to acknowledge that it's a red card. So he refused to say that it's broken the rules, and this follows Hamish Watson came out in an interview. I think it was on a podcast, and I was saying this is rubbish. It's never a red card, and something like that. And they ended up tweeting retracting it via Twitter.
Yeah,
I don't know what they're telling themselves in the Scottish camp about what the laws are, but it was a clear as day red card, and you have to accept it and move on. And for a guy like Zander Fagerson, who is an outside shot for Lions tight head, he's been playing so well, to cost himself potentially a last round of the competition by not just putting on the facade at least, and saying sorry,
yes sir, no sir, sorry sir, all of that stuff, slap on the wrist and back you go to play in round maybe 4,
maybe the last round. You might get the last round.
So it seems the imprudent gaming of the system from Zander and Scotland, which is not unprecedented. It is silly though. What do you do?
Scotland have a way about them sometimes. Like it was like in the World Cup with the typhoon, and they ended up getting themselves a fine by giving out about something that didn't even happen, which was the game being cancelled.
Right.
Their management of the system, they always seem to have just sort of a rough edge that does them no favours.
Yes.
There's an element of just, say what you think behind closed doors and say the right things to the right people at the right times.
Or just be honest and miss the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, I do.
Well, the thing about it is that it was unequivocally a red card. It was a silly offence to give away in a game that was in the balance, and it ultimately was costly for them as well in the moment, and now he's not going to be available for the rest of the tournament, so that's obviously a sickening blow for Scotland.
The great news for them is that they have tremendous depth.
They do have depth at tight head, so it's not a disaster. It doesn't scupper them the same way it might have done a few seasons ago.
Or it might another team.
Or it might another team, a lesser team.
Losing a tight head is often a catastrophe.
It can be killer.
Don't get me wrong, Zander's worth his place is great influence, but the way Nell played when he came on, and we know Bergen's quality, there's no major worries for Scotland apart from one of their guys gone, one down. If another one goes down, then it's a real problem.
That is, for sure. So I suppose with that we will pivot into the actual games, and we'll start with the first one of the weekend, which was England-Italy, and that finished 41-18 to the team in white in Twickenham. In a big empty Twickenham, there were some spectacular tries. I think it was an 8-try game overall, which was fantastic. And I suppose we'll start by looking at it from England's point of view, home team and winning team. They got back to winning ways, which they desperately needed to. It was like a little bit stuttery stop-start. Like it just, the 6 tries of it all does cover over a little bit of a stuttery performance.
It's hard to go. It's hard to read too much into the game against Italy.
Yes.
Like they obviously went down at the beginning of the game. They're not starting games as well as they used to, and that's a real problem under Eddie Jones. Like it was such a hallmark of the team was how well they started games.
Yeah.
And this time they failed to exit. They actually give Italy their ideal set.
Start.
Circa 2019 England would have started like Italy did, where they pin the team down off the restart. They never quite exit. They get to set up a line out deep in their 22, and then they move it to the wide channel for their left winger to get in space.
Yeah, it was great.
Pretty much like a blueprint England try against England in Twickenham. It was really well worked by the Italian offence, just sitting down the pack on a few key carries. There was a lovely carry in there from I can't remember who it was, but there was a lovely carry in the mix there. It might have been Negri. And it set up the overlap on the outside. It was a lovely score from Italy, but from England's point of view, it was kind of just
that's what they're used to doing to teams.
A bad hammer blow, and they took a while to get into it. They did score a nice pick and jam try after taking 3. After the scare, I think what really pleased them more than anything was just I think the Watson try was demonstrative of just the change in attitude, the willingness to counter-attack.
Yeah.
Like we saw last week from Scotland managed to make mugs of them because all autumn England had leaned so much on their picture of pinning a team down, forcing them to kick it out of play with a box kick
at around the 10.
Yeah, at around the 10, and then setting up a set piece and launching off the set piece. And what France discovered last season and Scotland discovered last week to an extent was just hammering the ball deep instead, getting your biggest boot sitting deep in the pocket and hammering it as far as he can hammer it. England aren't as threatening all of a sudden. They don't have as many men back. They want to set up a line out in the opposition half, and they've been instructed by Eddie Jones that when the ball is in their half, they're not playing any rugby. When they're in your own half, it's about setting up the other half, so you just hammer it deep. They're going to kick it back, but they're probably going to kick to contest, just given the nature of that kick, and then all of a sudden you recover the ball, you've exited pretty effectively.
But that didn't happen this time for a few key reasons. Garbisi's boot isn't quite the deep seeker that you would like. He doesn't quite have the pop on it of a Stewie Hogg or of a big boot Boutier or something, so they struggle with that. Yeah. But then also the change in aptitude and attitude, England ran it back.
Yeah, the example was there for Watson's try, where Italy hammered it deep, reasonably enough, as Scotland might have last week, but instantly there was a difference. England's whole backline phased back into the backfield. They zipped the ball across from one side of the field to the other. They caught it on the right hand side, zipped it across to the left hand side, and then moved it back and struck in a very England-like way, like that was the plan. Only it was a counter attack instead of a line out, and they scored it was an easy try for Watson in the end, but it was
he took it very well. He kind of sold 2 guys on the wrong way and took the inside on them, which was a lovely finish. Watson. It was great to see Watson. It was night and day from the Scotland performance the week before where he was subbed off, and you were pointing out he had like a couple of touches just before he was subbed off, and it was like, geez, I think they may have been his first touches. He hadn't seen the ball all game, whereas this time they were giving him a sniff. It was great to see the wingers back on the scoreboard. He got the intercept try that probably killed the last semblance of hope for Italy, although I thought it was probably already gone at that stage. But it was a nice pick, a nice poacher's try from Watson. Good to see him back.
It was a very good
game.
read. In fact, it was a floaty pass from Grabisi, but it was an excellent game-sealing read. It was good to see him back for sure.
Yeah, and Johnny May, who we have dynamically finishing his try up there. Yeah, a fantastic finish from a fantastic player. It was great to see him on the ball and doing what he's meant to be doing, which is finishing tries in some style.
Yeah, he had a rough week last week, but straight back at it this week. He's a killer, lethal finisher.
Yeah,
it was funny, the debate that emerged around it, triggered in no small part by Nigel Owens, who might become a controversial tweeter if his early days of retirement or anything to go by.
Yeah.
But he was suggesting that it should have been chalked off because it's jumping out of a tackle, and it
nonsense.
sparked this whole debate about, can you jump out of a tackle? Like, for all my frustration with this is that nobody has actually cited anything specific in the law book, apart from it seems to be dangerous, jumping dangerously into the tackle, or it falls under the bracket of dangerous play, which is then at the ref's discretion.
There was nothing dangerous.
In which case, there's nothing dangerous about that. But then Nigel was insistent that you can't jump out of a tackle, and so
jumped over a tackle though.
Yeah, I mean,
semantics.
Yeah, to me it seems very pedantic. Well, that's my whole thing, is that there was a tweet that summed up the whole thing perfectly, which was saying it sums up rugby union fans a bit much, that there's an awesome bit of cool looking play that devolves into a debate around the laws.
Yes, I mean, indeed. That's it's folly. It's like something that it gets me is we like to sometimes poke fun at Americans or something for things, but one of the things that Americans do get is the notion of making plays. In fact, making plays is probably an Americanism that has been adopted in because it's a good one for things like that. The idea that you make a play, and like in an NFL, guys will hurdle over tackles and vault over things. The appropriate response to a play like that, to a moment like that, is, oh, what a play! Not, oh, I don't know if that's legal, maybe it'll be chalked off, let's go to the video referee. Like, if you're saying that on commentary, you're not doing justice at all. You need to...
Well, I watched it back with the French comms, and they were giving it proper pomp. They were like, ooh la la!
Indeed, ooh la la! Perfectly appropriate response to a great finish.
It was a gorgeous finish from Johnny May, and if that's wrong, I don't want to be right.
Indeed, this is it. Yeah, but, sometimes you just got to call a great play, and that is a great play.
Yeah. But for all that said, for England, they did stutter a bit. They had a couple of good moments in attack. The counter-attack was very promising. That try before half-time was very promising. But they did end up leaning on their power, especially in the red zone. There is still an imbalance to Ford, Farrell, Slade.
Yeah, there's a lot of distributing in the midfield and not a lot of power. When you think of them at their best, they have Tuilagi in there, and what they were doing in the World Cup is like either we start Faz at 10 and have Tuilagi at 12, or we do the Ford, Farrell thing and have Tuilagi at 13.
Yeah.
Those are still like more balanced because you have a robust runner who can straighten the line and sit them down.
It seems strange that Ollie Lawrence fell out for that, but they're going with this at the moment. They're still moving the ball okay, but they were a little lateral at times, and it wasn't all easy.
No,
like you can say they had the game won, but Italy were, like, in that moment when they threw the intercept, they were on the attack. They had England moving backwards. They were moving the ball quite crisply. They have a nice offense. The score was 20-11. If they get a score there, we're pushing 60 minutes, and it's a one-score game.
That's true.
Which is not where Italy have been very often, let alone in Twickenham.
Yeah.
So there was potential there for it to be a much worse day out, but then Italy kind of ran out of steam in that attack, and then Garbisi throws that bad pass, and Watson makes a great play.
He does.
To use the term again, but he makes the read on it and gets the intercept, and that kills the game, and then everything's fine. They run out a couple of tries in the last 20.
That's
It's like the games against Italy are hard to read anything from. The key positive they take is that they looked so inept on counter-attack last week, and in a week's time the mindset has changed. They didn't kick the ball back. No. They made a noticeable difference in terms of what they were doing, and that's something to build from.
Scored 6 tries, 3 of them by the wingers. That's all positive.
In many respects, it was, as we might have suggested, the perfect game for them to have after that Scottish defeat, because it allowed them to iron out those differences. There was a clear attempt by Eddie Jones to do so. Yeah. And awesome to see them back playing attacking rugby, and they're going to be well in the mix. They got Wales in 2 weeks, and that's going to be a huge game.
This is it. Yeah, no, they're not out of it by any stretch, not at all. Italy, however, are out of it somewhat after 2 weeks.
Of course.
It was definitely an encouraging showing from them. They had their moments. The 2 tries were lovely. They were very nicely taken. It's nice to see. I had a lovely line from Tommy Allen for the second as well, in just off the bench. Lovely impact to take a score like that. Like the early try was definitely the highlight. I thought the way they executed out wide, the way they struck like that's exactly how they have to start games. It's what I was begging for them to do, is go on the attack, and then when they convert, it's absolutely fantastic. They did well to stay in the game as well throughout. The one that vexed me was kicking 3 to go 8-all, and then conceding 2 tries on things before. I didn't love it.
I don't necessarily hate it. We've had this debate too many times, but my thought was just that they were very close to staying in the game, and for me, what this team needs is to be in a game for 80 minutes. Like, they're putting the pieces together. Their red zone defense was a little improved. They were a little tougher to break down. They showed just a little more hustle. That was impressive. And the offense is going places. Franco Smith has a lovely design. He's putting nice words into Garbisi's head, and
Garbisi's running a nice back line.
He looks emboldened by what he's being told to do, and they looking to access the whole width of the field. They're expanding the field really well. He's got Carlo Canna in there. His kicking game is a little limited, and they will need Canna to come in and guide them around the field a bit more. But Tommy Allen to come on has great impact. Murray was great impact. And even Brex looked functional in the centre. But they moved the ball nicely. They stayed in the game. And I didn't hate the 3-pointers for that reason, because of how difficult it can be to score from 5 out. I liked them staying in. I liked them, throwing the ball back into England's court, and I just think had they maybe got that score, it probably wouldn't have helped them. Like, they didn't look good in the last 20. They get puckered out. But I just think what this team needs, more than a miraculous first quarter that they hold on to, I think what this team needs is just to stay in the fight for longer and longer and longer. And I like a few things that Franco Smith's doing. The tactical nous is good. I like his substitution policy. He's mixing it up. He's trying to
bringing the props in and out of the game.
Yes, starting his second props at a couple of weeks. He started with his second props and then changed them at 30 minutes. Just to give your first choice props the last 50 minutes, as opposed to the first 50. And it was without limiting their game time anymore. It was just a clever innovation. He's definitely,
for a team that struggles in the fourth quarter. That's exactly what you need. He's
figuring out ways to put together an 80-minute performance. It's not quite working. They're
still a few levels below. That's the issue, and it's another game that passes by, and it's 2 nice tries taken, but it's still a donut on the Six Nations table.
The result was never really in doubt. There was a potential for them to get back in it, but it was still a long shot then, and it didn't even come through. I mean, that ball from Garbisi might haunt him for a little bit, but he has to just keep going.
He's a young man. He'll have to have goldfish memory for moments like that. They need to encourage him to keep playing like that.
Franco's doing that. I like a lot of what Franco Smith is doing.
I like the way they look in terms of what ball in hand, and that was the compliment in week 1 as well. They put together a pretty picture even against the French, and they've scored a few tries. They have more tries in the tournament than Ireland so far, so that's very encouraging for them. But I still maintain they're just a few levels below, and they need
just a bit more.
One of these years they're going to have to try to get a point on the table, even though it's not a win, like a losing bonus point or a 4-try bonus point. You can't just finish every tournament on 0 and call it progress, because it hasn't been.
I know, but the thing that's kind of missing is what they used to have. When they were quite a blunt instrument, they had a tough pack, and a bit of physicality and a bit of toughness and a bit of difficulty. And you very often saw them staying in games.
You saw them 6-all at half-time or 9-6 at half-time or something, and then the fourth quarter fade would ultimately happen.
And that's what they need to add to this. I like what Franco Smith is doing, but I just wonder if under Franco Smith they're going to have the right sort of passion and energy levels, as well as the slick attack. You need that sort of toughness in defence. You need that get a jackal, get in and make defensive plays, and then start yelling and bringing energy and being difficult and being frustrating to play against.
Don't quite see that just yet.
No.
It's incremental improvements, but even still, some of the tries they can see, like the Johnny Hill try, it felt a little flat, and then even after Johnny Hill grounded it, there were a few Italians in the background just trotting back to the post as if they've seen this way too often before. It's like, well, we've just conceded a try, we're behind now for the first time in the game, here we go. It's like, it shouldn't be that perked up about conceding a try in the first quarter. It's not what you're about.
I wonder if in addition to Franco Smith they could use a bit of an emotional counterbalance to what he's doing in attack.
Maybe
an old school player like Ireland got in O'Connell
someone like Bergamasco or Parise or someone.
I know Troncon was in there at some point, but I'm not sure if he's still involved. But just somebody to get the blood flowing.
Yeah,
an out and out defensive guy as well as the offense that they're working on.
Yeah.
I definitely think you can tell there's a distinct difference between how the teams with a specific coach who's defensive minded and teams who have guys who aren't necessarily defensive minded down as defence coach.
Yes.
I'm thinking Ireland and Wales.
Yes,
with
indeed.
Simon Easterby and Gethin Jenkins running the two defences.
Yeah.
And it's like they're actually not really they're not stupid guys by any sense. They know the game and they could fancy themselves to have a crack at any coaching role, but they're not those defensive experts and defensive specialists like a Sean Edwards, which you saw.
He's one of the MVPs of the tournament so far. I would agree with that. They need a bit more grit. But at the same time, it was a good showing in Twickenham. They've had far worse. They scored a fair few points, a couple of lovely tries. Progress is key for Italy, and it's nice to see them playing. Again, attacking rugby. Sure, they were third on the offloads per carry chart in terms of their stats. So yeah, it was a positive enough week out, albeit another defeat.
Yeah, and the next one's a big one for them. Home against Ireland. Yeah. Ireland are definitely the worst team that's not Italy in the competition.
Currently, that's true. Yeah.
That's a huge game for Italy if they can. If they're going to get points somewhere.
Look at what
Georgia caused this Irish team problems in Ireland.
Yeah.
You got them here. You got them in Rome. Yeah, they can't attack at the moment. You've got to front up to that power game. You've got to not fall off tackles against big men running at you and put together a performance. Because the other thing about Ireland is their defence is gettable. Teams are scoring tries against them.
The wide approach that they've been bringing could yield results against Ireland.
We'll talk about it next week, but that's a big game for Italy. That is the biggest game of the tournament for Italy this year, for sure, for me.
And they go in with a little smidge of momentum despite the defeat, I would think, because they're stringing some passes together and scoring some nice tries. So hopefully, we'll see an Italian challenge.
Yeah, just one more thing on this game for you. There was a sour note to it, which was that Jack Willis suffered a season-ending injury on his knee.
It seemed to be a cruciate, but it wasn't a cruciate.
But
it's
they still don't know what it is.
Ender.
It's some ligament issue with the knee. It functioned. It sparked this debate about the crocodile roll, which a few people,
or the barrel roll, or whatever it's called. Yeah, it's only crept in the last few years. It's
been there. The crocodile roll has been there. I remember Leo Cullen.
He was a big proponent of it. But it's you grab them by the belt when they're punched over the ball. You grab the jackler and kind of roll with them and roll them out of the way. And what happened to Willis and what happens too damn often, and Dan Levy was another who suffered one from that, was you end up rolling all your weight onto one knee and it twists and then pops and there goes the cruciate. And it's a reckless kind of clean out in that regard. It's also you have to keep your feet in a ruck. That's where I would think you don't have to change the laws to start clamping down on the crocodile roll. Because as far as I'm concerned, you're going in there, you're in a position to compete when you grab the guy. But when you then fall down, surely that's similar to collapsing a maul. You're collapsing the ruck. That should be punishable.
I feel like it can be. It's something a few guys. Ben Ryan, I know, former Fiji Sevens coach and regular rugby mind, has been given out about it for years because
guys get injured.
There's too many injuries coming from it. Just a general critique I have of rucking at the moment in rugby is that it's very untechnical. A lot of what's going on is you're either doing one of two things. You're doing the crocodile roll is actually the most technique guys using the clean out. It's actually a way of moving someone, except it involves going to ground and buckling someone's knee on the way. But most of the time guys are just flying in shoulder first, even when they're legal, trying to just knock a guy out of the way.
And then you see Zander Fagerson or someone if you catch it wrong, Peter O'Mahony style, you can catch a head and get a red.
And this is the thing, when people are given out, they're like, well, what's he supposed to do? How is he supposed to move him? The guy in the jackal position is allegedly unmovable. And that's because you're trying to move their hips and their knees, and everyone's trying to move their hips and their knees. I'd it's easy to say from the back seat. I mean, at club rugby, it's a different kind of level. When I'm just playing social rugby or whatever. But it just strikes me as bizarre that there's not more wrestling going on. That there's not more technique. I mean, for me, when the guy's in the jackal position, you render him null and void if you play his arms, his little arms, because you may not be able to move his wide base and his hips, but if you can get your hands in and around his chest and rip his arms out, get his arms away from the ball, he becomes the jackal is gone. I just think more guys should be playing the arms, moving the ball away from the arms, and bringing a bit of sort of nous and technique to what they're doing, as opposed to just the raw brawn where you're trying to crush
firing in from all kinds of angles and losing your feet or coming in the side.
Yeah, but the idea that you have to get rid of the poach to get rid of that, because otherwise the poachers are going to be unplayable, it just feels to me like a strange innovation that there's not much technique going on, where guys are actually trying to wrench their arms away and then just register the jackal unsuccessful. That seems strange to me.
Yeah, well, it hasn't materialised yet. Hopefully it would. One thing about the Crocodile Roll though is that it is falling under scrutiny as on the foot of this game, and I think without changing the laws at all, you can eliminate that one.
Yeah, World Rugby would have to make a statement, but it would just be along the lines of this is now illegal with the little video that they do. Yeah. Easy done, and I think they should.
Well, it's like the broad things about rucks that has been true forever, and the laws are still there. You have to keep your feet. You have to come through the gate.
Yeah,
those are easy enough things to kind of go
90% of crocodile rolls are done right there.
Yeah, you're just like, no, you didn't keep your feet. It's as I said, the equivalent of collapsing a maul. You're collapsing the ruck. So I would think that you could officiate better on that. Hopefully Jack Willis recovers fully and we see him back on the pitch, because he was playing awesome. He grabbed his first Six Nations try like a minute into the game when he got off the bench, and then sadly the game ended like this for him, and we wish him all the best in his recovery. But I suppose with that we will leave this game and move on.
Absolutely. And next up we have the second game of the weekend, Saturday evening game, the game that has it filled my heart with joy. This game,
it was fantastic. It was the game of the weekend for sure.
I was in love with this game. I was watching it and I wanted Scotland to win. It's been forever since they've had a good run, and so I was kind of rooting for them. But then, I just could not help but enjoy the gumption and the balls on Wales and the clinicality on them to come back into it and to manage to steal that game, and the dynamics that were in this game. It was just fantastic. It was a magnificent game. Few matches managed to mix in that mixture of quality and intensity and drama and then offensive brilliance as well, and pure entertainment value. I just thought it was everything that Six Nations rugby should want to be. That, as I said at the top of the show, the lack of a crowd didn't show for once. Obviously Scots might disagree, it might have given them the home advantage, but you could just feel the intensity and the energy of the players. You felt the stakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Both teams delivered on that, and it was styles make matchups, and it was kind of a like striker versus counter striker kind of thing. It was very much like Scotland had a lot of ball, had a lot of chances to put the game away, but Wales just would take their chances so quickly, as they did in week 1 against Ireland. They're finding ways to score tries quickly, and that's been the key for them. And then the side with 4 tries beat the side with 3 tries, which is kind of a nice balance to it. But it was so close in the final moment for Scotland as well.
It was. It could have been in so many other ways. It could have been Scotland's day. I mean, I think everybody notices that they edged the opening half to the tune of probably greater than a 17-3 lead, even when they had that, and then 17-8 on half time.
Which was sloppy championship minutes either side of half time.
Yeah,
need your game management.
Sloppy from one side and great from another. But it was Scotland raced to the 17-3 lead, did miss a couple of gilt-edged chances to extend it, and Wales went and scored a try before the half to keep them in at a crucial score. And then they managed to get the first score of the second half after Scotland just missed a chance up the other end. Got up the other end, scored a beauty set-piece score, and then made it a one-score game. And then obviously the red card happens. Zander Fagerson sent off, gone. Talk about that as well. When we're talking about Scotland, it was a bad clean out. It was a bad mistake to make it a bad time. There's no question.
I have sympathy for him, because even as you were pointing out in that sequence of play, it was just a long sequence of play that had gone one side, then the other, then the other. The ball was in play for a long time. And if you're a tight head prop, that's tough. Those are very, very tough kind of knackering plays that do make you a bit raggedy. And like the point about it, it's a red card because he made contact with the head, direct contact to the head, and his arm was tucked. It's like shoulder to the head. It's red card. That's simple. But the other thing about it is, even if he hadn't made contact with the head, it was going to be a penalty anyway, because he just flops into the ruck off his feet, and it's like it's just a sloppy play.
He musters up all the energy he has left just to get to the ruck,
and basically. Then falls over. And
so connects with the head, unfortunately, and he has all the time to not do what he does, and unfortunately it happens, and it's a crucial moment because Wales go and score off the ensuing play, take the lead after Scotland led, and then Scotland fight back brilliantly and manage to impose themselves at scrum time after bringing off Darcy Graham. to bring on an extra lock, to bring on Nell, and then they also had 3 locks, and they had this monstrous scrum, and they kept taking scrums under the Welsh posts, forcing them back, trying to get the yellow card out them to level the playing
really
field.
Really wily stuff from Wayne Pivac to bring on Leon Brown after the first scrum penalty and change up the thing and change up the back row as well. I think he made a change and just kind of change the dynamic of it, but defuse the kind of the scrum that
momentum was there for Scotland.
It was just really savvy coaching to do that, and it worked.
And Leon Brown comes on, locks down the scrum, but then Scotland, by way of counterpunch, managed to score off first phase. Stuart Hogg beats the 2 Welsh centres, Tompkins and Watkin beats them both.
Makes a bit proper mug of
makes a mug of them both, and with a bit of stutter step and a bit of Hogg magic, he played brilliantly all day long. They score and retake the lead, but then Wales again punching right off a counter attack on the other end, whip it across to the right hand side. Beautiful structured play, lovely Kiwi rugby, and Rees-Zammit with this class little player manages to get the winning score, and Scotland huff and puff for the 10 minutes. Can't break through. Finn Russell's struggling, then they do break through, and then it's just on the last play, the ball from Doohan's break doesn't go to Stuart Hogg. It's a lovely play from Liam Williams, and he arguably tackles him off the ball after batting the ball down.
I know there's one side that'll definitely make that argument. He kind of does. Does, but it's one of those ones that if
happens at such speed,
it's so quick, and if the ref doesn't see it in real time, they're not going to go back for it. So it's just savvy play, and it's one of those ones that if the pass went to hand, it wouldn't have happened anyway.
It's a great intervention from Liam Williams, no matter what way you look at it. And it's just a heartbreak for Scotland, but awesome from Wales. And we are just going to look at it just through the perspective of both teams as well, just a little analytical look from each team's point of view. But I thought the main narrative from this game was just how brilliant it was.
What a game!
Awesome, both teams were in their own way. But Scotland we'll touch on them, and they will be feeling tough about it. It was a rough one to take after dominating a lot of the exchanges,
and after beating England in Twickenham in week 1. It's tough thing to swallow.
Bitter
pill to swallow. So it is. From the Welsh point of view, though, that's a fantastic win away in Murrayfield, and given where they were, where everyone was expecting them to be off the back of a truly terrible season last year, they've hit the ground running properly. They've obviously been the beneficiaries of 2 red cards for similar infringements. The onus is on their opponents to not give away red cards. They can't do anything about it. And the main narrative I'm seeing from it, as well as like the things like wily plays like the Leon Brown introduction from Pivac, there's just a great attacking mentality to this team. And as of right now in this tournament, they're the most clinical team, more so than France. Like France, despite
some chances,
they miss some chances. They're leaving scores out there. Wales are struggling. The macro critique of them is that they're losing lots of little battles around the park. They're not quite dominating. Their set pieces stuttering. They're not controlling the ball that well. But every time they're getting in the 22 with a sniff of a try, they're scoring one, and that's good rugby. I don't care what you say. There was a small narrative. I haven't heard it from most, but people in this whole weekend suggesting that Ireland played the better rugby and lost, and that Scotland played the better rugby and lost. And I'm like, I don't know about that. The 2 teams in question who beat them, France and Wales, just took their tries where their opponents didn't quite, and that's the difference.
At the end of the day, it's about putting points on the board.
Possession is not as important a stat as the scoreboard.
I mean, Wales, you're talking about, they spent 5% of the match in Scotland's 22 and ended up with
scored 4 tries. That's
38% possession, similar stats last week, and again a similar outcome. And I know they had the red card and people attribute it to that, but they are for sure a super clinical side. There are dynamics within that. They didn't start the game well at all. They didn't start the game attacking well. In fact, one of the key narratives the first half was Biggar and Davis looking so flat, and they had a line out. Actually, it wasn't in the 22, but it was in the Scottish half, where they went straight to Biggar and just bombed it into the sky. And Scotland recovered it. Scotland dominated the kicking game. Dominated it. That's why the territory was so bad. They just made the game happen in Wales's half for much of that first half. And their Wales kicking off an offensive set piece was very poor. It was compounded then by Scotland having a similar set piece, a scrum out the left, and scoring a try for Hogg out that, where Halfpenny kind of comes flat into the line because they've managed to get to the outside so well. And then Rees-Zammit's way too slow to cover him behind, and then the ball ends up being put between the 2 of them, and Halfpenny probably went a little early because Rees-Zammit wasn't there. there, and the two of them converge on the ball at the same time. Halfpenny bats it in behind Rees-Zammit. It's a bit of a calamity.
Yeah, chaos ball. It's great to see Hogg benefiting from things like that. He made it happen, and it's like as opposed
he
to
knows
last
from
season,
experience how painful balls they can be to deal with.
They're an absolute fullback's nightmare when you're backtracking towards your own goal line and trying to dive on a dynamic ball while guys are around you. It's very easily messed up, and we saw in that one.
Especially
it's good pressure
in winter conditions as well. It was an odd kind of game in that way. The kicks were dying in the air, and the place kicking was rough.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, Callum Sheedy missed a couple off the bench as well.
Yeah.
Some ugly strikes. It was they were heavy sounding.
We do have to talk about Callum Sheedy because one of the things, like we talked about Wayne Pivac's nous on 60 minutes when Scotland had scrums under their sticks to get Thomas Francis out of there, and managed to lock down a scrum to prevent the yellow card catastrophe that could have come. That was good tactical nous, but changing your super experienced halfbacks at the exact same time on 48 minutes was unreal, because they started the second half like they scored a great try. There was a crucial sequence, but I'm jumping ahead here to that change, but there was a crucial sequence at the end of the first half after they'd just been pulverised at set piece, well certainly scrum, not line out, but they'd been pulverised at scrum. They'd been lost the kicking game entirely. They were losing the power game. Scotland were getting in behind their defence. They had 2 tries to the good, and they were in their 22 hunting another try, and Wyn Jones makes an unreal poach, a great poach. Now the ref does give it for sealing, but it's cause Wyn Jones is in there. The playmaking loose head that he is comes up with an awesome play. They get up the pitch, they run a really, really nice smooth maul.
Their offensive maul was fantastic.
Yeah, it was dynamic. It was quick.
Yeah,
exactly. It was just the idea of this quick change and then pivoting to one side and pivoting to the other and doing it as a unit. It was really smart.
It was catching Scotland consistently in both halves as well. That one obviously, and then they had another one in the second.
A blitzing maul that generates a penalty and allows them to get down and set up an attack in the Scottish 22. Their first real purchase in the 22. They have another maul that is brought down, but it gets close to the line, and then they whip it wide in a couple of phases. Beautiful play from Nick Tompkins.
To get the hands free and get it out.
But Bigger kind of just sits back, and you could argue Bigger should find the outside man, but instead he gives it to Tompkins, and it's a simple little pass. But Tompkins manages just to spin out of the tackle and force the other defender to come in,
guys in,
and whip the ball over to Liam Williams, who just gives a smart pass out for Louis Rees-Zammit to get the try. It's a lovely, lovely, crisp set piece one made by Tompkins, made by Offensive Rugby, and that got them back in the game.
Yes,
that was
huge.
It was
vital, and it was also a dent in Scotland's confidence, and it probably contributed to some of the stuttering stuff we saw in the third quarter then, because obviously there's a huge difference between 17-3 and 17-8, but also if you go back even further, as you say, it kind of came from a Scotland attack as well, so they feel very aggrieved because they should have been 3 scores ahead, and now
it's great playmaking from Wyn Jones, great playmaking from the maul, great playmaking from Tompkins, but not too much from Bigger and Davis, and they had some bad moments. And then they start the second half, they get a freebie from Scotland. At the beginning of the half, they get a free easy penalty and a chance to go into the corner, and Bigger tries a banana kick and misses touch, and Scotland end up going up the pitch. They get a big steal from Hamish Watson, and then they set up an attack of their own, and they knock on the door, and just
get pinned for crossing.
As Cummings crosses the line, the pass that should have gone to him goes behind him to Graham, and the two of them get it mixed up, and then it's a blown try.
It's actually as bad as the place. It's like the double movement play where it's like it's not held up where you get at least get the scrum. It's a penalty and then it's
completely blown play. It's like the rugby equivalent of the fumble into the end zone that ends up being a touchback. It's a complete disaster from Scotland's point of view, and Wales get off the hook again. And then on that moment, Pivac changes Bigger and Davis out of the game.
Fantastic to see.
I just think
there's not many coaches in the world
who
do that.
Like, say what you want about Wayne Pivac, he's ballsy and he knows what he wants. And bringing on Little Hardy for I don't know how many caps he has, but not many.
He's great.
And
he played really, really well.
Just crisp and quick and doing what he says on the tin, as Thomas Williams did before he got injured. And bringing on Callum Sheedy, and then the next thing, they're finding tries, and they find the maul gives them great purchase. But
Sheedy finds a lovely ball to Rees-Zammit to Halaholo to Rees-Zammit, I think, or was it Halaholo to Sheedy to Rees-Zammit? I think that was it. And it was a lovely little kind of interplay of hands, lovely connect. And then Rees-Zammit, despite being a try hungry, try scoring winger, does the absolute right thing and draws the man and feeds Liam Williams, who goes in untouched.
Yeah, it's Halaholo to Sheedy, and it's they set up a lovely screen in the centre. They actually work it really well. Get the out half on the outside, and he picks the right ball. He kind of makes a fool of Graham, then Louis Rees-Zammit, and just get one of those glorious set piece tries where the passing is so crisp and the play design is so good that nobody lays a glove on anybody, and in you trot on the outside.
Untouched.
It was
lovely,
a beautiful try in that way. Like, it's nuts. The Scots were at 6s and 7s, and nobody laid a glove on anybody, and that's just an awesome score whenever that happens.
It is, yeah.
Then obviously the red card came, but Wales did have the momentum at that stage. It is a game changer. It came immediately after that score. They made it a 2-point game. They had a long open piece of play, and they get the red card. It's tough for Scotland. Wales just happy that it happened about 2 weeks in a row. It is a factor, no arguments about it. But it's what happens next. Last week they struggled after going a man up because Ireland responded really well, and they struggled to get purchased. But they had a penalty. They got into Scotland's 22, and crucially they scored another try. They got a great maul going again. They got it up to the goal line, and Wyn Jones manages to pick and get the score because he just can't stop making
awesome plays. He's been one of the players of the tournament as Wyn Jones, and well deserving, and it was a crucial score, and it put the pressure on Scotland, who then obviously went up the other end and made them defend for a while. And then just what do you want from your young exciting winger but to steal a game back from Scotland when you're away from home and it's the last quarter? A fantastic play. I love the instinct is to get wide and attack with Wales, but when you have quality like that on the wing, just give them the ball early as they did. It gives them the option to get the chip in as well, which he did. He managed to take the outside.
You could see some great coaching in that as well. Just the way that they set it up, it was very Kiwi. They just moved the ball a little wide. They set up a midfield screen outside of Sheedy, with Beard as the distributor. He had Beard and a forward next to him, very Kiwi, getting the big skillful lock out in the wide channels, and it just sits down Harris for a moment too long, and once the ball gets outside Harris, it's game over. And Louis Rees-Zammit is away on the right wing, and there's really nothing that anybody on Scotland's team could do once he gets the ball. He just executes it perfectly.
He does.
Glides away, puts the chip in at the perfect time. It's on the money. It sits up perfectly. Try and a brilliantly taken try, class game-winning try. From there they had 10 minutes of gruesome defending to do that they did really well. There were a couple of great steals in there. Both of them managed to strip Keble at one point,
which was vital.
Scotland back, and they just never let them get into
a lovely kick from Rees-Zammit. One of Rees-Zammit's super plays came subsequent to that try as well. He'd already had 2 tries, but a somewhat loose kick came to him, and he put it in a lovely banana kick into the open space, and then found touch, pinning them back. I think that was on around 71 or 2 minutes, and it's really lovely to see a young man look so mature and executing a tough skill and the right play in the right moment, just calmly and coolly, as if he was playing on the park, in club footy or something.
He's wearing confidence and enjoying his rugby, and guys like that make all the kinds of good plays. Like a striker in football, the weight lifts off their shoulders once they score a goal, and it's like that for these young wingers. They want to score tries, and they get the try. They're happy, and all of a sudden they're happy to make plays for the team. And he gets a couple of tries. He's I think top try scorer. He must be with 3 tries.
He's 3 tries.
And all of a sudden he's happy to try everything. He's happy to make good plays for the team, but he just wants to get involved. That energy and that confidence that a young winger gets from getting on the board is huge.
Yeah, indeed.
And you look at controversial. You look at the other end with James Lowe, very static and disappointed, and he has the capacity to make plays, but he's just looking like he has the weight in the world on him because he's not getting the space to score the tries, and that's what wingers want to do.
Indeed.
I just love the way Wayne Jones
Wayne Pivac
is approaching the.
He might be Wayne Jones in a few seasons if it keeps going well, or Williams. Wayne Williams.
But I love his optimistic approach to the game. It started to look more Kiwi, and maybe
it's also quite as Kiwi as it is. It's quite Welsh too. Their tradition is quick service from scrum half. Lovely expansive footy and using the full width of the pitch to attack you with. Wales have a tradition of doing that, as much as we saw them become a robust defensive unit under Gatland and have some good strike plays. The initial time of Gatland's, in terms of Gatland's tenure, the Welsh faithful were kind of bemoaning the fact that he was making them a bit more bludgeoning and a bit less flowy and offensive as they were used to being. And Pivac seems to embrace that, as well as it being Kiwi style. It suits Wales down to the ground. I've often made the point that even though they're club sides, don't necessarily play the top quality rugby, they all have a sniff when there's a sniff of the try line, even down at the level of Dragons, who are quite a poor team. But when there's a counter-attack on or something, they switch on. They have a good instinct for attacking footy. And it's great to see that in the national side. And them scoring tries away in Murrayfield and such beautiful ones to win the game.
Like, there were signs of great defensive improvement in that last 10 minutes as well, where they held their discipline really well.
That's right. Yeah.
And didn't give Scotland entrance into their half, apart from one or two breaks, but managed to shut them down with a great play from Liam Williams. And maybe, these couple of wins, these couple of breaks
momentum
might be what they need just to spring into life. Exactly.
Certainly tees up their game with France very nicely, doesn't it? It's
game with France from the last weekend could be huge. The game against England is going to be first priority.
Huge.
That's obviously we'll get into that in depth next week. And listen, from Wales's point of view, like we're optimistic about Wales. There is a reason why everyone is kind of giving out about them. Like, Scotland did have every chance. They were blown away in that opening period. They were kicking balls very poorly. They were losing micro exchanges. The whole game was taking place in their half. Their set piece, their line-out actually had some good hustle, but their
line-out's much improved, and their offensive maul much improved. There are positives in that, just to see their pack being put in some
mismanaging their way around the park.
That's true.
Dan Biggar nowhere near involved enough, and like, we'll talk next week about what they should do there. But dropping Dan Biggar for the England game doesn't tend to be a good play. So you have to get him involved somehow. You have to sort of. You have to generate a bit more game management and get more opportunities to be clinical. But the clinicality is a huge positive, and
that's their main positive. They're taking, as you say, 5% of the game took place in the Scottish half, or Scottish 22, and yet 4 tries were scored by Wales. That's fantastic. Like, that's the main stat you should be looking at from a positive spin if you're Welsh, because you're scoring tries, and that's going to win you games more often than not, despite not being quite the full package yet. But they're getting there, and momentum's key.
And score tries, you keep winning games, but they are going to have to get better at scrum and better in all these little areas.
But they were improved on like things like their line out and their offensive maul that improved, and then with momentum and confidence, it's
absolutely. They're always been a confidence team. Big game against England, and they'll look forward to that. If they win that, Triple Crown in the bank and on for a Grand Slam.
Yeah, indeed. What a mighty year it could be for Kimru Ambith and all that. And
is that how you pronounce that? Probably not. Is that how?
Kimru Ambith, I think. Oh. Correct. Feel free to
that's
correct
how it's spelled, but I don't know. It tends not to be
probably not. Well, my Welsh pronunciation is not something that we're going to get into on this podcast, because I don't know, the editing will be bad. But we will pivot on to Scotland then, because conversely, as great a game as this was for us, the neutrals, and for Wales in terms of the Welsh fans watching, no doubt delighted. If you're Scottish, despite begrudgingly admitting that it was a great game for the neutral, it's very disappointing to come out the wrong side of it, obviously, because being at home, coming off that momentous win against England, feeling like you probably played a lot of the rugby, or the lion's share of the rugby, in terms of just how you held the ball, how you dominated the territory game, the way the pack was performing, the way the scrum was performing, the way Stuart Hogg was performing. It's very disappointing to come out the wrong side of that result, and it's there, but for a whisker. Obviously that pass could have stuck, but there are a few other moments, the crossing call that shouldn't. Well, it was the right call.
There's a huge amount to reflect on. I think you have to start with Scotland on the positive.
You do,
which was like they were enormously successful in a number of areas, and they showed great heart, and they showed real quality. In that opening stanza of the game, they were demonstrating an ability to control where the game was being played. They were kicking the ball really well. They didn't have it all their own way at the line out, but generally it was going well, and they were having they were mixing it up on offense. They were counter-attacking off poor Welsh exits pretty well. Like, Gareth Davis's kicking wasn't great. Obviously there was the dead air factor, but they were getting Darcy Graham and Hogg were combining on the counter-attack and giving them purchase in the Welsh half, moving the ball really well. And then you look at the first try they scored was excellent piece of play from Finn Russell, and then great instincts from Johnny Gray.
Just to be there, hit the line beautifully, carried really strongly, kept his feet, and went in for a second contact, which was
everything that we want this team to be. They were wonderfully physically industrious, playing a disciplined traditional brand, controlling where the game was being played. And then Finn Magic came in, he cuts through the 2 back row forwards, Faletau and Wainwright, flicks the ball to Johnny Gray, runs through, and then they execute. Ali Price, audacious little kick with the wrong foot. He's a lefty, and he just pits it with the outside of the right foot right onto Darcy Graham's stride, and it just completely catches Wales off guard straight after a line break. Halfpenny's just a little out of position because he's expecting the ball to go left. Ali Price picks it up, dinks it in behind for Darcy Graham. It's just really, really well executed. The perfect gelling of what the Scotland team can be. And then likewise the next try for Hogg, just executed perfectly off a first phase off a left field scrum, sitting down the midfield, feeding Russell, who's looping around so he can put Hogg in space with a nice pass, and then Hogg does the rest once he's in the space. He drifts the Welsh defenders. We talked about it from a Welsh point of view, how awkward it was, and Halfpenny comes up into the line. Just as he does that, Hogg puts the perfect kick in behind. He knows how tough those things are to deal with from a fullback's point of view. Rees-Zammit's not there in time, and all of a sudden it's a try. It's not that you would have seen it live because the cameraman cut away.
Yes, that was a curiosity. I don't know if that was with everyone's coverage, but it was cut away just at that crucial moment when Halfpenny kind of didn't gather the ball, and then suddenly it cuts back to Hogg scoring, and it's like, oh, okay.
we got it on the replay.
We got it.
It was an awesome piece of play, and were controlling the whole home game. The whole game they had some awesome, like they dropped the ball off the restart after scoring that try to make it 17-3 and gave Wales a chance. Then big scrum penalty from Sutherland and Fagerson.
Sutherland and Fagerson looking great. Sutherland was looking great in the scrum himself. He was causing all kinds of problems, and then Nell, even when he came in or was forced in, was great at the scrum. Their scrum is one of the great positives for them. Like, they were doing damage in Twickenham. They were all over the Welsh scrum, to be honest. Wales were just trying to scrum for parity and getting it out of there. The pack is mighty. They'll have some concerns with their defensive maul because they're normally good at defending the maul.
They were caught by speed.
The speed of transition with Wales was really, really fantastic, and did catch them out. So there's a little work on there for sure.
That stuff is going to happen, but I just thought that the key here for Scotland was the couple of offensive sets either side of half-time, because they were playing close to a perfect game.
It's a similar it's a story we've seen for Scotland before, just the tries that have gone a begging.
Even last week when they were dominating the game, they let England have a chance and a sniff, and the difference here is that Wales took that sniff, England didn't. But they dominated the game for not enough scoreboard pressure. Even though they scored two very smart tries, they had another offensive set before Wales got their try, which ended in a steal. It was just a little slow. They had a couple, for me, it's on Russell to bring that. And he had a couple of moments throughout the game. He actually had a couple of picks, one of which he chalked off with an instant steal towards the end. Another pick where he was just trying to give the delayed ball, and it was a decent read from Tompkins. He's kind of got to make that stuff happen a little more. He also wasted a couple of penalty advantages with cross kicks that didn't come off or grubbers that didn't come off. And Scotland really do need him, and he did create some lovely plays. He created the first try. He kicked well all day. He's still top class, probably the best performing out half in the home nations in Britain and Ireland. But he's for the elite guy who's in there, Hogg's outperforming him at the moment, and he needs to make those killer plays that put tries on the board. Because they were a bit stuttery, and then obviously there was that one after Wales got the try on the other side of half time to take a 24-8 lead, which might be too much for Wales to
come back and from. It's certainly a try does damage to a team's confidence, and conversely butchering a surefire try has the opposite effect,
because there were great defensive plays. The one before the first half was a great defensive play from Wales, but that one when Scott Cummings goes ahead of Graham,
it's just a butchered try.
It was
the try. It was that phase. It was right there. They'd worked it really well. They'd controlled the ball nicely. They'd managed to get some tempo on it finally in the 22, and he was there to crash over, and the ball just went to the wrong man. Those little moments. It's the difference between, we were complimenting Wales for being so clinical with the chances they were getting, despite being dominated in large parts in other areas. That's the positive you'll take from Scotland, is that you did dominate large areas against a team that for the last decade plus have probably had the better of you in terms of the head-to-head. So it's nice to see you being able to outdo them at the scrum, be physical, be forcing them onto the back foot,
played with the kicking
all of that
games.
stuff. The kicking game's been fantastic, but clinical. You need to be able to take more tries, your tries.
That one with Cummings and Graham was the one, and that was what it starts with just this really clever line-out play where Turner, who's been just sensational the last few weeks, throws the ball over the top of the line out straight to Lang, who flicks it inside to Graham, and they cut the line and get to a metre out, and then from there it tightens up a bit. There's wiliness from Tipperick.
It slows up before it speeds up again. Scotland had to
Wales give away a penalty and then force them to take it, and then they do take it, and they're slowly working their way around the corner, and it's just a little it's a little less than slick. It's a little different from we'll talk about France in a wee while, but for what France do when they're in the red zone is much better.
Yes,
and that's definitely a work on for Scotland when you have a guy like Finn Russell. They are flying up into Finn's face, and it's on Gregor to figure out a way to sort of check defences when they're doing that. He needs maybe a runner on his inside and a runner on his outside coming from deep. They need to check defences coming flying out into Finn's face, covering the grubber and the passes. But they do need to move the ball a little better when they're deep in the red zone, because a few too many chances went to begging.
Indeed.
And that was the killer, because then Fagerson comes in with that game potentially a game losing contribution, alright. And from there they really do struggle to they concede 2 red zone tries pretty instantly. They struggle on the maul defence, and they do great to hustle back.
To take Darcy Graham, a danger man, off to accommodate Nell. All of that stuff happens in that little spell, and Wales being clinical enough as they are, they managed to take the game away from them. But that's to take nothing away from like obviously the game itself. It was just so fantastic.
I thought they showed tremendous heart as well. I don't think there's any question about the character of the team in that sense. Well, they did lose the game, and they lost they had lacked nous in key moments either side of half time to put the game to bed. That for sure is true. But the spirit that they showed when they were down a man, to go up the fields, to start scrumming Wales off the park, and then take the try when Wales forced them to use the ball, and then even in that last sequence, I saw Finn Russell
look for the floated over the top, and he wasn't there.
Yeah, he was working so hard to try and break down that Welsh defence, and it wasn't happening for him. And then just towards the end, it was almost like Mahomes reminiscent from the Super Bowl, where he's just getting destroyed by a defence, but then he just keeps working, and Finn makes a great play. At the very, very end, he's spinning around, he's got 3 defenders around him, and he just flicks a ball, out to Doohan, who's unmarked, and Doohan's away. And in another world, that's one of the all-time great Six Nations tries, if he manages to connect with Hogg, but Liam Williams' intervention proves too much, and that's the way it goes.
It's a slightly slack pass. It wasn't a great showing from Doohan. That's a bit of a negative thing, is that he was kind of frozen out of the game for large periods, and then obviously that was his moment, and the pass didn't stick. And then conversely, Rees-Zammit, who he was marking, scored 2 tries and assisted another. So it's like, those aren't the fun days for wingers. Wingers want to score tries, and he's been in great form, but they didn't quite manage to play him in. And I think that goes to what you were saying about Finn. He's obviously getting crowded out, but he needs to maybe up the performance level a little bit to align with where Hogg's at.
Show your elite, and that's sort of where Hogg has come from. It's just like, show it. And Finn, he's been out of the picture for Scotland for a year, so he is going to need to sort of bet himself back in.
He's coming back to a slightly new setup in terms of how they're playing. Since last he was kind of a regular guy.
He'll be a key man. Like Scotland, they've lost this game against Wales, having beaten England, and that's going to be a knock the stuffing out you kind of game. But this home advantage doesn't mean anything.
No,
they know that. So these games are just games against teams. They've got France coming up. It is in Paris. It's Finn coming back to where he plays, so there is that factor. I think Finn is going to be a huge player in that, and that's a massive game. They've got France in Paris, then they've got Ireland in Murrayfield. Ireland have been a real problem for Scotland in recent times.
True. Yeah.
Those 2 games are going to be absolutely crucial, because if they go, if they go 0-2 or even 1-1, if they lose to France and beat Ireland, after that performance against England, it's going to be hugely frustrating for them. They're going to this game against France is going to be massive for Scotland, and really they're going to go in there feeling like they need a win to progress, and if they don't win, they're going to feel stuck in the mud again. And then France are tough. France are the best team in the competition. They're going to be at home, so it's going to be a huge task, and they're going to need Finn Russell on his A game in Paris.
It's part of their winning conditions. That's definitely what's needed. But that was undoubtedly the game of the weekend. Fantastic game of the tournament so far, game of the year so far,
game of post-pandemic.
It was just everything you want from a rugby game. 7 tries overall. The team with 4 took it, a 1-point margin. Went down to the wire, the very last play.
And a defensive play wins it as well. It's not like defences weren't involved.
No, indeed. So it was just the perfect marriage of drama and high quality and intensity throughout. And it was just a pleasure to watch. And hopefully more of that as the tournament goes on.
Absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
With that, we will move on to the last game. Certainly we'll have to put our own patriotic hats on to review this. We had on Sunday the Sunday game, we had Ireland 13, coming up a bit short against France, who both broke their duck in Dublin with 15. So 15-3 it finished to France, and the first time in 10 years they've won in Dublin, and they were good value for
it was another tight but enthralling encounter from a neutral point of view. Ireland were dominating that opening stanza, only for a 3-point return. France then strike from nowhere with a great 7-pointer, being themselves.
Beautiful try.
They looked the cleaner, the more slick side pretty much throughout, and they did get nervy towards the end. They didn't have it all their own way up front. Their big scrum was kind of bullied a bit. Their line out was in trouble.
Tortured a few times,
and they just were nervy. Like, they weren't their clinical selves as the game rolled on. The Kelleher try seemed to knock the stuffing out of them.
It did.
And they had this feeling. They had this feeling that they were going to be caught out in a game that they shouldn't be caught out in, having put it to bed seemingly with the Pinot try. A freak try makes it a 1-score game, and then they don't deal with that well. They sort of recede into themselves, and they actually just want to kick the ball away. And then they actually get a couple of offensive sets and chances to put it to bed, and they knock on and they miss their passes, and they're just not quite right. And then Ireland get the opportunity to sneak the game, but Sean Edwards' defence does step up, and in the crucial moments they do maintain their discipline, and they do repel Ireland, and they shoot, keep them out. And really, from a structured defence point of view, they don't concede a try all game. It's but for that one crazy incident off the set piece.
Indeed, it was unlucky because they stole Ireland. What happened was they stole Ireland's line out, and as it went to deck, Dupont anticipated it going one way, and it just took a wicked bounce away from them and into Kelleher's path.
It's the negative aspect of the wee wingers, though. Like, Villiers has to cover that space and make that tackle, but he just has a big man who is actually deceptively quick running into that space, and he just doesn't get close. And that's bad from Villiers, but it does catch them completely, because Dupont is usually covering that space as well, except he's run for the ball that's bounced away from him.
Indeed. It's kind of a free try to concede, but as you say, it's the response that would concern you a little. But I would attribute that to just the nerves in Dublin. It has been a hoodoo for them for quite some time, and they've underperformed in Dublin, and even beyond France themselves. You've seen Toulouse kind of play within themselves, and Clermont a few times as well in the club game too. So there were definitely some demons in the Aviva Stadium and in Dublin for them to exercise, and with stuttering kind of falling over the finish line, they did manage to do so. And it was great that it was a defensive set that did it, because the difference that Sean Edwards has made to them has been spectacular, and it's great to be ticking these things off the list as they have been over the last 12 months in terms of these big kind of monkeys to get off their backs. One by one, they're shedding monkeys now.
From that horrible decade they just had, they're just chalking off all the bad records that came in. It was really just a terrible decade for French rugby. It was. Started with a Grand Slam and went nowhere from there. Well, actually, a Grand Slam and then a World Cup final, and then nowhere from there.
That's right.
Lièvremont doesn't look so bad when you talk about it like that.
That's true. Yeah.
But it was refreshing to see that. It's refreshing to see them look a proper side and playing smart rugby, and definitely
playing distinctly French rugby as well. It's nice to see the offensive instincts. We were alluding to the carries per offload stat, 9 carries per offload in the tournament so far through 2 rounds. Lovely, exciting, tempo-filled, audacious and ambitious rugby that they're playing, and it's lovely.
They did struggle in the opening stanza. They struggled to get out of their territory. Ireland were putting these bombs up, and actually Brice Dulin was playing really well along with Villiers, and Pinot actually wasn't under many of them, but it was Dulin and Villiers who were being targeted, and they took a load of them, made some spectacular catches for the little men that they are. But then, like, the pressure did eventually tell with all of those ones.
And it's a law of averages. A few of them go loose.
A few of them went loose and went into Irish hands, and they ended up defending a lot, and they gave away a few penalties. Jerome Garces's impact has yet to make a telling contribution, in the sense that they're still...
Certainly, it's not as telling as Sean Edwards' contribution to them at all.
No, they're still giving away penalties for days, but they did manage to hold Ireland out, did manage to come up with some plays. I thought Gail Ficou
was fantastic.
For me, I don't know how Gail Ficou doesn't get man of the match in that game, because
considering his offload for the Olivon try was spectacular, and he's ripped CJ Stander in the 22 at the beginning of the game. Brilliant defensive hustle. It was his tracking across, even though he nearly tripped in the midfield. He tracked all the way across when James Lowe nearly got that try in the first half, and it was his impact that put Lowe's toe out.
Like, that is great the
work
for me. That try, that non-try for James Lowe is the difference with the Sean Edwards defence. Because they're at the moment they're not actually full blitzing. They're actually doing quite a bit of subtle work on the outside. Vanson's quite a clever defender, and he's not biting in too much, and he's very often drifting. But it depends on the moment. Like he's going out to shut down the outside, but when the ball comes, he'll drift outside. He was handling Ringrose really with ease all day long, and Fiku was coming in and making plays. But yeah, the difference is just the reaction on the hustle. For that particular play, they get conned by the Irish attack, and it's the best bit of rugby that Ireland play all game. They get outside them, and then it's a 2v1 situation, more or less. But James Lowe gets it, and he's staring down Brice Doolan, and he's probably going to go and score that try.
He goes over Brice Doolan, but Fiku
that's the difference is that they never stop running, even though they're bought in on the midfield. They just push off and sprint, and you can. I don't know how Sean Edwards does it, but he gets those guys running through walls for him, whoever he's defending, and that's the difference. Just giving those extra inches, and I'm sure they'll be saying that in the review session. It's like, you would never have done this, a year ago or 2 years ago.
That's how he's getting the results, because again, confidence is based on evidence is an expression that I cling to a lot, because it's true. And if you have no evidence, it's tough for Italy to have confidence that anything they do will result in a win, because they haven't won so long that there's no confidence there. But with France, if you want to try and get them defending, you have a guy like Sean Edwards, who literally every team he's touched, he has seismically changed just their attitude and outlook on defending, and excitement to attack when they're without the ball, an offensive defence, and he's very, very much of the opinion that you're proactive on D. And you can point to moments like that as evidence. Like Fiku actually earlier, he makes contact with Zander on a dummy line in the midfield and stumbles. That's what's even more impressive, is he kind of gets knocked off balance as well as sat down as the ball goes outside him, and he just regathers himself and sprints towards the touchline and is there to make the vital contribution.
Gets there with not a second to spare and makes the contribution, and that is just the hustling work rate of Sean Edwards' defences, along with the nous as well. They're not fully crazy.
No, they're not.
They're not mad dog blitzers. They're nothing like that.
They're not drifting retreaters.
Vansant and Fiku are emboldened to make reads, and they make clever reads. They don't bite in. They don't expose themselves.
No.
They drift with the play, and but they drift in the play while getting out on the line. So they just restrict the area for the opposition to move in, and they just do a really, really good job. And they shut Ireland down all game long.
And they're dynamic as a pack as well. They're not quite as kind of big and ogreish as they have been in the past, but what they are is kind of quick and fit, and to a man they have no problem getting up and getting around the corner on defence, which is great to see, because that has been a problem for them in seasons gone by.
In spite of the fact that they still have bad discipline errors, and
they do.
LaRue's trip is just ridiculous.
Yes, indeed. And as actually Murray Kinslow isolated a moment just before half time, where he was just back on the pitch after the yellow card for tripping, and he tried to do it again. He cleared Van der Fleer, fired him way past a ruck, which could have been pinned but wasn't, and then he sees Gibson Park goes up and throws a toe out again. It's pretty audacious, because if that trip lands, it's a red card.
They need to rein that in. Just the stupid plays, because it
can kill you.
It cost them last year. It cost them the slam, with the Huas red card.
And we've seen with Van Mahina an ability to blow games as well with red card.
So they do have to watch that. But while they were a man down because of that fell, they did finally, at 28 minutes into the game, get to set up an attack after being pinned down, having to defend, and then escaping and giving away a penalty and having to defend.
There was a vicious cycle of that.
They finally get to set up an attack 28 minutes into the game. It's a set piece, it's a line out on one side, and it's a clinic, as it was in Paris, in how to open up this Irish defence. Irish defence is super vulnerable if you manage in a phase or two to get across to the far side of the pitch and then whip it the next phase straight away right across to where the line out originally was. Because usually they have a hodgepodge of non-expert defenders, be it tight head props or scrum halves or ridiculous personnel out there.
Yes, it's true.
Because Henshaw and Ringrose and the back row are all following the play so much. Ruddock actually stays out there, but he's pretty isolated with Gibson Park. But they just do a perfect job of opening it up. They move it into the midfield. It's Fiku again. Of course it is, taking the ball up, and Ireland love to have the Henshaw crash ball, but he's instantly more effective because he puts on class bit of footwork, beats Billy Burns hands down, and actually gets to the edge of Zander, and Zander just gets him down. And it's quick ball, and then Jalibert straight cuts a line. I think it's between Henshaw and Van der Fleer, and then gets the offload. Marchand actually is inside him. He takes the offload, instantly gives it into Dupont, who's running that tracking line. It's all instinct. They're running the inside tracking lines, finding the space, and then Dupont just knows Pinot is going to be picking a line into where the space is, floats one over, he takes it, drives nearly towards the line, and then they know we've worked it from the left side of the pitch to the right side of the pitch. We know Ireland aren't going to deal if we can get it to the left wing in one play. And guess who? Gail Ficou drifting
again,
off to the left, manages to suck in Gibson Park and just flicks it off for Ollie Vaughan. Ollie Vaughan lovely
trots in, absolutely as easy a try as you'll score for the French captain, but it was just
one of the tries of the weekend. For all the great tries that were scored in the weekend, it was just beautifully well constructed.
In terms of how to deconstruct a rigidly set defence, and it does away with the narrative that defences are just too indomitable now and there's no offensive footy. No, if you execute quickly and offset piece, you can unpick defences. And it's a concern for Ireland for sure that they are opened up a little bit too easily, given that they are owning the ball, and with the few moments of possession.
It was literally the first attack they got set up. It was very, very. It was literally a carbon copy. No, it wasn't quite a carbon copy, but it was the same idea as what they were doing to Ireland in Paris back in the autumn, when Ireland had made no adjustments. They're still super, super light in the spot where the line out is. If you can get it to the right wing and back across the left wing, Ireland are just full of...
They're gone.
They're gone.
Have
a try. Ireland are super narrow. They come up with powerful narrow plays, and France know if you sit deep and get it outside them, you're gonna have success, and especially after you break the line, you're gonna have success. Ireland can't deal with that tempo.
No, it's true.
Yeah, they do a great job.
It was absolutely, it was a hammer blow to the Irish at a timely moment, because when you're seeing a team dominate for that long and you're having to defend for that long, it's the perfect response to the 3-pointer that was an insufficient return for Ireland to just punish them with a try. Absolutely punish them. And to be honest, they had the game sewn up then with the beautiful Pinot try, which was excellent in its own right, because they were planning to drift that way, but then Pinot actually recognised that the chance was on the other side. They folded around very nicely, and a nice little kind of wrong-handed offload to Pinot, wrapping around to find the edge and find the corner as well. Just really smart try-taking, really smart identification of space and then attacking of it by the French.
It was really well done. It was a crucial score. Actually, in the build-up to that score, they did manage to change the game, notwithstanding the Dupont butchering of a try. Right at the start of the half, they catch Ireland cold. Marchand just drives through Herring like he's not there, and he drives all the way to the line, and just off a short carry, and then it's just a try. Willemse, your biggest player, probably the biggest player on the pitch, comes charging at a rate of knots towards the try line, and Dupont picks it up right next to him and tries to whip it past him and catches him in the mush. And sometimes Dupont's trying to do too much. I mean, you got this massive giant charging towards him. Just pop it to him. Let him take it and score. And that was a missed chance, and they weren't all perfect in that kind of way. You know, they were, in large parts, they were losing the first half. They were blessed that Ireland couldn't attack better in some ways, although they did defend very well.
They did.
But in those kind of moments, taking those tries could matter more on another day. But crucially, what they did after being pinned down at the start of that game, they did figure out the kicking game.
Yes.
And Ireland were putting up these big bombs, and in the second half, not in the first half, they were taking some of them, but they were generally pinned down in their own half. But in the second half, they managed to punish Ireland on a few key occasions, just by taking those high balls, popping it off, and launching a kick deep and finding grass, and then forcing Ireland to exit from there, and just turning that bomb attack into just negative yardage to the tune of lots, which allowed France to set up some crucial attacks. And they started to edge the kicking exchange more and more as the game went on. When Ross Byrne came on, I don't think it helped Ireland. James Lowe started to get tired. James Lowe, like Keith Earls last week, makes the error where he drops the ball and gives them the in to set up that Pinot try.
That's right.
And then obviously the bad tackle from Lowe is in there as well.
Yes.
And it's just an easy try then, but it's born of figuring out on the fly what Ireland are doing and punishing it.
Because it's not sensible.
They evened up the territory game in the second half, and that gave them enough opportunities to score. But the real concern is what happens in the fourth quarter. After conceding that anomalous try. They really do tighten up.
They absolutely they really pucker up and do nothing, and they kick a lot of ball, and they kick everything away and give Ireland every chance. And if they were playing Wales in that scenario, they probably would have lost that game. Or it's got like a team that could attack, because they've kicked enough ball away and they're only a score ahead. And certainly when it was 15-13 at one point and they bombed it down, and then you had Gibson Park and Lowe combining and running it out, and it didn't amount to anything because no one else was switched on, but there were chances and there was space, and their chase wasn't completely cohesive.
No, and even more so, they actually got the kicking game worked on a few occasions, and they managed to set up attacks on a couple of occasions in that last 20 minutes, attacks which could have yielded game-winning scores, and they almost didn't seem it. Yeah, they played within themselves. They'd like a knock-on at the base of a scrum.
Yeah, one very unlike them.
Yeah, all these little things where it was like, oh god, these guys are nervous.
Yes, and it was. They're understandably nervous, but like less so from like understandably from a macro. The Irish looking at it were just thinking, oh god, we're losing this game and it's terrible. But if you were a French person looking at it, you'd be thinking, we haven't won in 10 years. We're a much better team than this team. How are we only 2 points up?
Flashbacks of Ireland stealing the game as well, and that was what must have been going through their heads at the start of that last offensive set. But they do a great job. They did maintain discipline.
Oh, the defensive set, the final set of the game is fantastic. That's everything you want as a picture from Sean Edwards' defence in terms of that's what you're going to point to. That's what we need to be doing. And they shut them down.
Dupont, the leader, gets the steal
as he would
to seal the game, and that's just that's just wonderful for the confidence of all involved.
Yeah, and they're great win too, and they are favourites as it stands. Although Wales may have a thing or two to say about it, but France looking dangerous, and with yet another poor record expunged, monkey off the back, more shackles to be thrown off, and they are a dangerous prospect for any team, and it's great to have France back as a dominant force in the Six Nations, because it's been that long, and it's like, last season they were nearly there. They were put up the best challenge to England. This season they looked the best team, to be honest. They look the most balanced team in it at the moment as of 2 rounds in.
Discipline and bottle.
Discipline and bottle those are the two caveats to attach to that. But generally it's a good time to be a French rugby fan as it stands.
Seemingly.
Conversely though,
get some silverware.
Yes, that's the next step, is silverware. For Ireland, however, it's not a great time to be an Irish rugby fan, as we'll reveal. It's quite deflating. Like I was saying, like nothing quite gets the optimism up like not playing for quite an extended period. Like I was reasonably optimistic going into the Six Nations, even because we hadn't played in a while, and we beat Scotland. No, it's like not quite. But then you watch them play a couple of weeks, and you're just we're not very good at all. It's painful. I went to the stat, whatever it was, 56 carries per offload thrown, like all the possession you could ever want, 60 verging on 70% against these top teams. You can't fault the Pack. The Pack are doing Trojan work out there. They are dominating large periods of the thing. They're stealing lineouts. Paul O'Connell's fingerprints all over the Pack. A lot
of playmaking going on from the likes of Ian Henderson, Tyke Byrne. Reese Ruddock comes into the team, has a great game, impactful. They're robust enough in the contact and just making huge plays. I thought the set piece was exceptional. Cian Healy rolled back the years.
Yeah, fantastic showing.
Put it on
Mohamed
Ouas. Yes. I was like, oh geez, Cian, good man.
Yeah.
Like, he hadn't
on the day that he became Ireland's most capped prop, he overtook John Hayes, and he put in a great performance. The Pack were dominant for pretty much the whole game. That's where people would be thinking, they are unlucky to lose because they dominated loads of that game. But it's like, you gotta score points. Like they were at home and they scored 13 points. That's not enough to beat many teams. Like
no, they're dominating possession again and just not moving the ball well. I mean, it's one of many things, but the defence is its own problem. They're like a great rugby team without a good attacker defence.
Yeah, and it turns out you can't win games.
Yeah, they are owning the ball. Their Pack are doing work, but defensively they're getting caught out just about every time the other team gets in their half, and then offensively, they spend more time attacking than defending for less results. Seemingly, like it's just.
One try they got was an anomalous bounce.
Yeah, it was well taken by Kelleher, and an illustration that there is some good zip and some good instinct in the team from a personnel perspective, especially up front, especially in the forward pack.
Yeah.
But their movement of the ball is very, very poor, and it's very, very poor in a number of ways, big and small for me, that are
very concerning.
deeply concerning. Like it's I don't see an easy fix that somebody, like, you can talk about offloads.
It's not even just offloads. Like, people are, as I've made the point, every now and then the guys will look for an offload. They'll win a contact and get their hands free and go like this. There's just no one there. Like, compared to converse with France, where like Dupont can float one over because he knows Pinot's going to hit it. There's just no one running that line from Ireland, and there's a few damning bits of footage from it. There was the one that Murray Kinsella was citing that was very, very disappointing and criminal from a rugby lover's point of view. 1 minute on the clock. They poach a line out on the French 10-metre line, flip it back to Billy Burns, who instantly hoofs it in the air, even though there's numbers and space out wide. And it's like, what are your instincts? You just turned the ball over. Like if you're telling your under 13s how to play rugby, you flash it wide. Like it's turnover ball, flash it wide, and they just don't do that. They're playing very little offensive or instinctive rugby. Well, despite being told we're being told it's heads up, but it doesn't seem like
the early phase of there is a heads up element to it, and I'll get to that. But the early phase of the game, the explanation of the kicking is that it was a very clear tactic and a bad one. Like it was a tactic to try and put pressure on the vertically challenged French back three, and we know it was a bad tactic because it worked and yielded very little as a result. They managed to generate a number of instances where they managed to recover the ball from these high bombs, and then they were just working with less field. They had the ball in and around the 22 instead of in and around the 10, and France had less space to defend and found it easier to defend, and Ireland couldn't break them down. So Sexton last week was talking about the massive difference between getting the ball super close to the line versus like a little out, and I actually haven't seen that in the game. Most scores are not coming from 5 out. They may be used to it, maybe this was the case, but in this season's tournament a lot of tries are coming first phase off set piece from anywhere in the field, and that is like, especially if you're in around halfway, the idea of just kicking the ball straight away is a missed opportunity, and from a tactical point of view they're missing that. But from a structure and a shape point of view in terms of what they're doing in the offense, it is also bad. But there isn't much in the way of shape, and this is where I think they have a problem. They are emboldening the players to play heads up in it, and that is very much a mindset thing. But what's materializing from it is a very very stale showing. Like Gary Ringrose doesn't really know what he's doing in the wide channels. He's drifting off. He's trying to make a play, but the Vincent's just reading him and drifting off with him, and he's just chewing up his winger space every time, and ending up going to deck. He's not a natural distributor, and he needs coaching. A lot of these guys are a bit like that, where the heads up play is one thing if you're dealing with a bunch of Kiwis and a bunch of Welsh players, for example, who have this built-in from the ground up identity of running the ball and an instinct that comes from schoolboy level and younger, where they know what they're doing and identifying space. And I think it's clear that Ireland don't really have that, and I think the presence of James Lowe and Gibson Park in the team is illustrative of that.
Well, there were a few moments, like the one I cited before, where that very last chance saloon thing, where France did kick it back to them in their own 22. Gibson Park gathers it, is getting bundled into touch, flips it out to James Lowe, who instantly runs up the touchline, draws a man, gives it back to Gibson Park, who runs it. And it's like, that's great play from the two lads, like really good hustle. And then I rewatched the play, and like Henshaw's right behind Lowe as he receives the ball, and he just lets him go. He just watches him go, and that's one of your backs. And then CJ Stander is out of, like, because it was just come from a kick, he's halfway back out of the field of play, watching Gibson Park run past him. And he doesn't move to get in. There are a few guys in the midfield who are facing the other way, aligning for something else. No one is switching into what you should be switching into, which is chance, go, run support lines, attack. None of that happens.
That's my thought. My issue here is just that is not in the Irish players to a large extent, and the two boys, the two Kiwis, they're both making mistakes now as well, but they just look fish out of water in the team completely, and they're not on the same wavelength, and the team mindset is just a curious one. Like the plays that they're trying to make, the heads up they're trying to do is all after the catch, like the shape that they're running in before the catch. There's not much line picking. The tracking runs are abysmal, and then the plays that are being made is just like catching the ball and putting a bit of footwork on it, invariably just drifting on the outside and chewing up space.
Well, that was another criminal one from Gary Ringrose again, running sideways. Was one in the middle of the park, which was just so damning, where he managed to get to the outside and he had two men outside him and just one man in front of him, so it was a 3v1, and he dropped it on the toe instantly, which is criminal enough. It's bad. Like, he was running sideways to facilitate the kick rather than fixing and giving, which is just what you should do. But then when you zoom out on the wide shot of that, Gibson Park, talking of fish out of water, he is miles ahead of the kick. He's around 15 yards ahead of the kick, running the very positive inside tracking line that you want your halfback running, expecting to be getting on the end of it because there's a 3-on-1. And the second Gary kicks it, you can see him just throw his hands up in the air in the middle of the park, like, what are we doing? And it's a good question.
The thing is, like, Ireland have never played with that offensive verve, apart from maybe when O'Driscoll was there, but O'Driscoll just made things happen. But like, those instincts aren't embedded in Irish rugby in the way that they are French rugby and Kiwi rugby and Welsh rugby, for example. And I just think in terms of working the heads up, you have these guys thinking on totally different wavelengths. Irish players don't run tracking runs naturally. They're not always trying to look for tries in every situation, looking to take risky passes and pick crazy lines, and try and find tries from anywhere. And I think there's a limit to the personnel in terms of what they're doing in that way. Like they need a lot more coaching to be successful. And then there's limits to the personnel as well. Like this is where I'm almost more negative than most on it, where I just think not a very good team in a lot of ways. A great pack in many ways, but I just don't really rate the back line really anywhere. I think they're quite weak, generally speaking. Their best back is probably Ringrose, and Ringrose still has limits to him. He's constantly drifting. He's been put in this distributing role because he has to be, because no one else could do it. But he's not a natural distributor. He's a great runner of the ball. But they're all great runners of the ball. You saw one play, literally one play, which was the James Lowe try, but it was also the James Lowe not try. But it was a clever. It was actually a bit of brains. Like they maul strongly, they move the ball wide, they run a well designed move for once, because Henshaw always crashes the ball off set piece, and this time he doesn't. They run a screen, he flicks it in behind to Burns, who misses blindside wing Keith Earls, who's in tight. It's all in tight, and this is what would drive you crazy about Ireland, is that they work in such tight channels. And again, they have Henshaw, Ringrose, Burns in behind, Earls, and it's all within like a few meters of space. And usually they would just run a convoluted play in that space and get tackled, and all the French defence converges on them. But Burns gets the ball out the back and floats it past Earls beautifully to Keenan in space, and he's up. He has the ball. He has Doolan, and it's like half a 2-on-1. It's like 2 or 1.5, because the defence is drifting across. But what's telling to me then is that you have your fullback and your winger in that amount of space, and the try doesn't get scored. Like people talk Keenan, he could have given the ball earlier, could have given the ball later. It's pace. They don't have out and out pace. Like Keenan is the young, exciting talent of the season, and he's exciting for a lot of reasons. He's a great hustle player. He makes good defensive plays. He's got a great read for a young man, and decent offensive instincts. But when you get these young, talented players from other countries, they have an attributable advantage that the young Irish guys just don't have. And likewise, James Lowe is a great player in a lot of ways, but he doesn't have that out and out pace.
The quickest winger,
They don't finish a try that's there because they don't have the pace to finish it. And that's where I kind of feel a bit negative about the team. It's just the whole, the instincts aren't great, the skill set's not great, the speed isn't there. If they start offloading, are they going to just become as good as France? Attributably, I just don't see that.
No.
And that's my fear for Ireland going forward. But I do think what they need to be is a bit more like England, in England circa like 2019. Obviously, everyone should be looking up to that team, but not just from a power perspective, but from an offense perspective. Have this lovely structured offense where you're trying to weave gaps like that one, where you're actually being a little smart.
Use pods and have a bit of shape that allows you can play heads up rugby within a shape. It's like when people talk about a zone defense or something, and it's like, oh well, he was in a zone defense, that's why he let the guy run unmarked into the thing. And it's like, every defense is a zone defense. You can defend your zone, but when the guy's getting the ball, when there's one guy out there who's getting the ball, mark him. It's the same with an offense. You can put together a shape. That doesn't preclude you from playing heads up rugby, but you should have ideas of certain pods that you want to do and just fold into a decent line for attacking.
Running multiple screens and getting a few more players wide and running deceptive shapes is going to be vital to Ireland, because at the moment they're being told to play jouer, and they can't. They're not good at it. And they don't link up. They have no clue what wavelength Gibson Park and Lower are in. When it's a one-score game and they have the ball in their 22, and then they go and they dart and they realise this is a chance. And we see All Black teams do this as well.
The thing is, we see the bit of optimism I would have is that you see Connacht run from there, you see Leinster run from there at times, you see better instincts at club footy, and you certainly don't see any crimes against rugby like was committed in the first minute when we turned over a line out, had the ball on their halfway, and without even looking or thinking or worrying or thinking it was a bad thing, kicking it straight up in the air when there were 3 men against 1 man out and a whole half of the pitch to run into. That's not just not good at offensive instincts, that's actually a crime against rugby itself. You just got a turnover ball, what are you doing with it? That's criminal. So you don't have to be France to recognise that when you have a turnover like that, that's a chance to attack. Ireland are a curious combination of overly prescriptive with tactics in the early game, and then utterly blunt as an instrument when they're going through their multi-phase.
It's no prescription at all there. It's just it is extraordinarily rudimentary then. And that is there's definite coaching critiques, but I definitely have my personnel worries as well. I don't see, like, Keith Earls is probably our fastest back, and he's like pushing 30. And he's not even a great player himself, but he's the quickest. Larmour would be the other one. Larmour probably could beat Earls in the sprint. He'd be the only one. But just from a natural attributable point of view, I'm not encouraged. I'm not even encouraged by Gibson Park's present. Like, Gibson Park and Lowe, let's be real, they're club level Kiwis who've been thrown into the test arena because Ireland hadn't got better to offer in those positions. Like, if Gibson Park we got Super Rugby Aotearoa coming up. If Gibson Park was in the Chiefs squad, he might be third choice scrum half behind Brab Weber and Te Tauriarungi.
It's very possible.
He might well be.
I've always thought that. I still think he might be our best option, but I'm not under no illusions about what he is. And James Lowe, similarly, he was nearly but not quite All Black material, probably because of that lack of top tier pace, and the fact that they have a much better understanding of what wingers they have a much better understanding of what wingers are than Ireland do. Ireland probably have the worst understanding of how to use the winger jersey.
The Georgians,
maybe the Georgians would compete with them, but we're very similar teams in that way. Like, Keith Earls has been a good servant for many years. Like, the wingers have a short shelf life. Like, Louis Rees-Zammit is 20 years old. There'd be all kinds of arguments in Ireland about he needs to be bedded in, and he needs a few more years of Champions Cup rugby before we throw him in. Better give Earlsy the thing. Like, you can throw a winger in straight away, an ambitious young winger. Louis Rees-Zammit has 3 tries. Ireland have 2 in the tournament so far. Like, what are you talking about? You need your exciting young guys thrown straight in there. There's criminal stuff going on.
You could go on and on about how limited Ireland have been in attack, and I think we have.
Probably talked to death.
It is what it is. I'm very negative about where Ireland are as a whole team. I think they have a great forward pack. Don't get me wrong, and I think they have great spirit as a team in many ways. But I think defensively as well and offensively, it's wrong. I think they need a lot more help from the coaches that they're not getting, and without being like, I don't being flippant about people's jobs and everything. I think from a rugby point of view, it's a mess of a coaching ticket. I didn't like it when it was announced that Farrell was coming in, and now the coaching ticket is even more of a mess than it was before, because Simon Easterby, the former forwards coach, is now a defence coach. That's a first time gig. Andy Farrell, who was once a defence coach, is now the head coach. First time gig. Defence is a mess, consequently. They bring in Mike Catt, who was an attack coach under Italy, and he offers very, very little. The attack looks bad. The attack looks bad. The defence looks bad. Paul O'Connell has come in as a first time forwards coach and actually made an impact so far.
They've stolen 7 lineouts in the first 2 weeks. Where their lineout was a basket case at the end of last year.
That's impressive stuff from Paulie, but there's just a lot of first time coaches in there. There doesn't seem to be a lot of coaching expertise. And the players are being just left to drown out there because there's not much good coaching going on, and they don't have the capacity to play like barbarians. They're not good at that kind of play. So, like, with the idea that they're just going to start flicking offloads and be grand, I don't see it. I don't see the raw talent there. I see a good forward pack and a backline that needs a lot of work and a lot of coaching that's not being done.
And probably a fundamental grounds up kind of skills and offense thing that needs to come
they need in. Like a Pat Lam project. If they're ever going to be the team you want them to be, they need like a Pat Lam project where he comes into an organisation and he just changes the whole culture from the ground up. And that would be the way to get Ireland playing the way you're talking about.
Well, I think
but right now it's not there at all.
But I think the macro thing is it's all about World Cups, and the teams that score tries win World Cups, because World Cups are summer events, not winter events. So you need to have multiple ways of scoring, and Ireland need to realise this, and hopefully things change soon. But as it stands, they are kaput, fish out of water. They are dead, 0 from 2, no chance of winning the Six Nations this year. So maybe a chance to throw some kids in there and see some experimental stuff, because as I said, the World Cup's most important.
It is. And listen, not to go too far into our own selves, congratulations to France. They played a good game, not a great game, but they did enough. Kind of like we thought. They stuttered. They're still a work in progress. They know that as much as anyone.
Oh, they do.
But winning games while playing like that is huge. They seem to be delighted after the game. They had those footage from the dressing room of them all singing "Freed from Desire," going crazy. And Ollie Vaughan looked pumped. He was delighted to get the win. He said it was a really tough game for them, and now they can come on and have a real go at this Grand Slam.
Yeah, and they are fully deserving of that. Yeah, much credit to France. I'm excited to see them play again. I think them v Wales in the final week is a fixture that I'm salivating for already.
Yeah, I know, right?
Exciting stuff. Alright, with that I suppose we will move on. That was the Six Nations round 2. That was a fantastic round of rugby all told.
It was brilliant. Yes, we're going to change gears entirely. We have parked the Six Nations and we're going to take a look all the way to the other side of the world, where exciting return of rugby in Australia and New Zealand is upon us.
That's
Super Rugby, as a new format this year, Super Rugby AU and Aotearoa are going to be... Oh, I butchered that, didn't I? Aotearoa. They're both going to be taking place over the coming weeks. Super Rugby AU gets started this week.
Yes.
Aotearoa next week, but we're going to take a look at both competitions, just looking ahead to them, and the new format this year with a couple of new law changes, and it's always the most exciting, maybe Champions Cup rivals it, but the most exciting club competition in the world, or one of, for sure.
Fantastic, for sure.
We're starting with the Super Rugby AU. What's the story here is that they're each going to play a domestic season, Australia and New Zealand, and then there's going to be a combined competition once those competitions are won, which I think is a great format.
That's perfect.
It gets the best out of both. I think it's great for Australian rugby to have an internal competition.
Well, we saw it last year where it was forced upon them with COVID, but they actually got into it. The Super Rugby AU last year, the crowds were starting to creep up in terms of the attendances.
There were local rivalries, and there were true dynamics, and the best players emerged, and there was confidence gained.
An intrigue and confidence that can only be gained from playing each other. It can't be gained by being whooped by Kiwi teams all the time.
Indeed, but it puts them in a better position to compete when they're playing the Kiwi teams.
Yeah, no, it does.
It's a great opportunity for them to build some confidence going into it.
Build some competence.
build some competence and some confidence. But they've got a very young player base at the moment, and they're trying to blood new guys. So getting them more competitive game time before they face the big bad Kiwi teams is no bad thing at all.
Yeah, and there's some domestic silverware which has its own kind of chips in terms of having some stakes to it as well. It's good. It's definitely been a success so far, and I'm glad to see it return this year.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen it, it's a fantastic watch. They play great offensive rugby. There's wonderful competitive games played at a breakneck speed. It's by far the most easy on the eye version of club footy that we get is Australian and Kiwi Super Rugby.
Yeah.
And starting with AU, for those uninitiated, the competition features 5 teams.
Yeah.
We got the Queensland Reds, the ACT Brumbies, the New South Wales Waratahs, and the Western Force.
That's right.
Each representing
and the Rebels as well.
Melbourne Rebels.
Rebels.
I forgot to mention the Melbourne Rebels. They're in there as well.
Our favourite team.
The competition's going to go on for 10 rounds. Each side's going to play their opponent home and away, and have a couple of bye weeks in there as well, on account of the odd number teamness of it all.
Two games per weekend,
And then after that season, at the end of the season, the competitions, there's going to be a semi-final and a final in Super Rugby AU, so just the bottom of the log team is going to miss out on playoff post-season football.
Yeah.
And then all 5 sides will join the Trans-Tasman competition with the Kiwi sides. There was talk of maybe doing like a little, maybe the top 8, maybe the top 6, something along those lines. But for this season, it's going to be all teams involved in the Trans-Tasman competition later in the year, which is no bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a semi-final and a final that'll end it. And just to cover rule changes is the other thing, because this is a big dynamic going on in Super Rugby this year.
Well, certainly last year Super Rugby AU was pretty innovative in bringing in was it the 50-22 and the 22-50 rule, and the goal line dropout all came in last season, and they were doing a thing. The naysayers were saying this was just kind of lifted from rugby league. I am not one of the naysayers. I actually think it's a grand thing. The goal line dropout is neither here nor there, but I love the idea of the 50-22 and the 22-50, because I think it incentivizes positive kicks, as in like it'll get your spiral back in because you have to go for distance and grass to get reward for it. But it also kind of pulls the wingers back from the solid defensive line. You can't really have 13 in a line anymore because you're not covering all that space. And if the 50-22 is in effect, Yeah, you can be facing down on a big chunky yardage and possession. If the kicking team retains the ball in those circumstances, it makes for exciting opportunities with boot, and probably less aimless kicking, which is obviously something that we're not in favour of, and we've had a few seasons where it's been inflicted upon us. So yeah, I'm all for those rules.
Likewise, there's another cute rule with the free kicks off the restart. If you don't kick your kick 10, or if you kick it out on the full, or if you kick it dead, instead of just being a scrum on halfway, it's actually a free kick.
So you have the option of a scrum.
A la sevens.
Yeah.
Well, you have the option of a tap. You have the option to
Yeah.
run it up and tap it, and it potentially increases speedy play, and you might see a bit of that in Super Rugby AU. In addition, the golden point rule for drawn games was introduced last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know about not having draws. I think draws are fine, but it's fine to go to extra time as well if you want. I don't really have an opinion on that. But obviously you need overtime for knockout games.
Yes.
And this is where I think this is very exciting, because they're finally starting to get it right, as opposed to any ideas about a drop goal competition or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
Which is facilitated by a silly copied from football extra time, where you have to play out the whole of extra time. I much prefer the NFL version, where it's like, the game's over, we got to decide it, next score is going to win. And that's what was introduced last year, but it's actually been tweaked to be even better. For this year, the drawn match is now going to be decided by a golden try.
Lovely.
The first try scored in a 10-minute extra time with 2 5-minute halves will win the match for the team. A penalty or drop goal does count for points towards the match score, but the game will continue until either a try is scored or the 10-minute period expires. And that's interesting. And they say it's in place to encourage attacking play in overtime, which makes all the sense in the world. But also, just a try is sort of a definitive way to end the game. It does bring into question the one anomalous point that you made when I was bringing this up as an idea of my own without realising it had already gone ahead and done it.
What happens if you're 9 points down and you score a try?
Yeah, it's like the Quidditch scenario.
Yeah, indeed. You caught the snitch and the game's over, but you're 400 points behind. So
it doesn't get you enough. So I wonder. It's a curiosity.
Is there a prerogative of, like, it's your prerogative, you score the
maybe
try? Maybe
is it a 10-point try? Is it just a game-winning try?
Game-winning try. Yeah, it scrubs out the 3-pointers. You could do it that way. I don't know. Yeah, no, that is the one scenario. It's a very unlikely scenario. So, draws are uncommon in rugby anyway.
You're talking about getting a draw and kicking 3 quick 3-pointers in 6 minutes, and then conceding a try, and then what happens? I don't know.
I'll take things that'll rarely happen, but I won't say never to that.
It's interesting to see them go on the NFL route of a draw being a regular season draw being bringing up extra time. That's definitely interesting. I don't hate draws usually because they're so rare in rugby anyway. When they happen, I'm like, ooh, draw. But
it can be exciting. Draws are lovely.
Extra time brings in excitement as well, so I have no hatred for that. Listen, ahead of the competition, we're going to just take a look at each of the teams in the competition, in a bit of detail. We're going to start with the Brumbies, who are the champions.
That's right, and perpetually the strongest side and standout performers in Aussie rugby. They tend to punch above their weight. They don't play flamboyant rugby very much. They kind of are the nuts and bolts, most fundamental team in Australia, and that tends to be good enough because there's a lot of loosey-goosey stuff you see from other teams. They
definitely tend to be the best coach. They do sometimes bring some razzle-dazzle. They brought a bit last year in their championship season. But they still have that
always a mauling force,
ferocious attacking maul, and if pre-season's anything to go by, they're going to continue in that vein. But they're a very well coached team by Dan McKellar. They've got some real quality in there. Nick White at scrum half guides them quite nicely. Noah Lolosio, the young guy who came in the final last year, he's a great exciting player. Aotearoa, the captain from Tighthead, gives you an indication of the mean mindset,
the nature of the team.
Pete Samu, also a quality player. Tom Banks at fullback,
real standout. Tom Wright as well, who made his debut in the Tri-Nations just gone, is fantastic. Against the All Blacks, looks a really good player, to be honest, and he's a winger. So really
he's actually out, Tom Wright, for the first few weeks.
I was going to say, he's going to be missing for the start of the season, but he'll be coming back in. And there's a lot of quality there, and there tends to be, as we said, a little bit more nous than most of the other teams in the competition. Probably a little bit more heft and physicality a lot of the time.
A bit more guts in key moments.
And clutch, and a bit more. Generally, they maintain their discipline pretty well compared to every other team in this tournament. Usually in Super Rugby, Aussie teams tend to get a little bit ill-disciplined when things get loose and things go against them. The Brumbies are an altogether tighter force, and they're worthy champions going into this, and they'll probably be favourites.
Yeah, and they are the Canberra-based team that sticks in the mud against the usual Australian sporting rivalry of Queensland against New South Wales.
That's right.
The ACT Brumbies, very much the big dogs in Australian Super Rugby in recent seasons.
Yeah.
But there is a challenge to that crown, a real challenge being mounted at the moment by Brad Thorne's Queensland Reds.
Yeah.
And they're an exciting team. They've been up and coming now for the last year.
Well, Brad Thorne came in a few years ago and cleaned house and kind of axed a lot of people. Controversially got rid of Quade Cooper and a few others as well. He cleaned house Carmichael Hunt, and it's kind of cleaned house and started again from the ground up. And it's only pretty recently that we're starting to see that real new seismic change in their ethos and outlook and personnel start to pay dividends. They're starting to get more cohesive.
They're well drilled, and they build off strong defense, discipline, set piece, and power, and then launching attacks from there. James O'Connor's just been named captain. He's had a renaissance. He's flipped Brad Thorne from being a skeptic all the way into being his strongest believer. Just with great work rate and great hustle. They've also got, in terms of folks to watch out for, Taniela Tupou at tight head is
arguably the best tight head in the world right now. Certainly based on his Tri-Nations showing, a force to be reckoned with at international level. This is club footy in Australia. He should be dominating a lot of scrummages, you'd expect.
He's awesome and dynamic, and in Super Rugby he really gets to show off all his skills. Explosive runner of the ball, wonderful offloader of the ball for a big man, and a dynamic scrummager. He's a clutch player who makes a huge amount of plays for this team, and just very much, as tight heads rarely go on the excitement books, but this guy does. He's one of the most exciting players in the whole comp.
One of the players to watch. But then also the midfield, the fledgling midfield from Australia, Hunter Paisami and Jordan Pataya. That's exciting too. There's scope for some great offloads. Pataya, a super exciting player.
The
really lovely
incumbent Wallaby midfield is O'Connor, Paisami and Pataya.
And there they are for the Queensland Reds. So there's potential for some lovely attacking footy, as well as some kind of fundamental stuff in set piece with Taniela Tupou. They're creeping towards a completed package, and it's definitely they'll be targeting.
They made
season.
The final last year. The next step is to go and win this competition, and then they'll get the opportunity at season's end to mix it with the Kiwi sides and see where they really are, which is just very, very exciting. They're very much. They would be a lot of people's favourites to win the competition. Brumbies will have a thing or two to say about it. But they seem to be an up and coming force with a huge amount of talent, some top quality players, and potentially the best side in it.
We'll see. And then that moves us on to the Waratahs. Now traditionally they've been kind of the biggest, baddest team in Aussie sports, just coming out of Queensland and stuff, and certainly you hear it a few times.
New South Wales, they're Queensland rivals, but
Queensland rivals and New South Wales, but it was something we noted even with Wallaby commentary, that the Waratahs always seem to be the commentators' favourite team. Even if the Western Force score a try, it's bad defending, whereas if the Waratahs score a try on the Western Force, it's great attack.
Whenever you get Aussie coverage of the Waratahs, it's very much told from their point of view. They are the protagonists,
indeed,
of the
as opposed to the villains of the piece
of Super Rugby a lot of the time. But this iteration of the Taz under Rob Penny has yet to take off, and they're losing. They've been hemorrhaging talent in recent seasons. Bernard Foley gone to Japan, Michael Hooper gone to Japan, Curly Beale gone to Racing. That's a lot of the spine of what that team was.
They finished last season.
Izzy Folau obviously nowhere to be
seen.
Well,
obviously he was a huge asset for them. It was Folau and Beale was really where their offense was kind of humming when they were at their best a few seasons ago. That has gone by the wayside. They finished 4th in the competition last year. They have Will Harrison at out half, who looks an awful lot like Foley from a zoomed out kind of range in terms of just his gait and his physique, but he's probably not quite the player even Foley was, and I'm not convinced Foley was an elite out half at any point either. I think he was quite a good facilitator.
He had some good form for a few years, but if they're going to compete, they're going to need young guys to step up and start really, really performing. And last year that was the story of Super Rugby AU.
It was
young guys who you hadn't necessarily seen if you were outside Australian rugby, bursting onto the scene and performing
Being
really,
very
really
impressive.
well, and coming into a Wallabies side and looking very, very competent at test level. And if they can get another crop in this team coming through, that would be massive for Australian rugby, giving them a bit of depth and a bit of competition. They're captained by the little scrummy Jake Gordon,
who was quite impressive in his cameos for Australia as well, wasn't he? He was coming off the bench for Nick White, doing a decent job of closing some games out. That's good experience. They also have some Jack attack, Jack Dempsey and Jack Maddox, isn't it? The two kind of more experienced guys that they have there. They're kind of a bit lighter on Wallaby test experience than you would have seen from Waratahs teams in years gone by.
Yes.
They're definitely going to be bolstered by young guys. They're going to, if the season's going to go well for them, you're going to have to see a few breakout stars who we don't quite know yet seize their jerseys and really do a good job.
But don't sleep on Dempsey and Maddox either. Maddox and Dempsey, about a few years ago, maybe the 2018 season or somewhere along those lines, had explosively powerful seasons. Dempsey in particular was playing as
skittling folks with the ball. His ball carrying was ferocious.
Beating the All Blacks nearly by himself, and you know, he looked like the sky was the limit for him as far as being one of the world's elite back rowers. He struggled with injury, but if he can get any kind of form going, he could carry this Waratahs team to some success. But like I say, fourth last year, a lot of young guys in the team. Rob Penny we've seen up close and personal in charge of Munster, and don't know if he's all that.
No, it's tough to blame him for the Munster one though, because I think that was more of a culture clash than anything else. He truly won, but it's early days in terms of his tenure there. They'll hope to do better than fourth this year for a team that are used to kind of winning things. It's been a long kind of I guess transition period is what you generously call it. As I say, look out for some young lads for the Waratahs because they'll need to perform.
And they do at their very best, like all Aussie teams, play a quick, high-tempo offensive brand, so they should be at the very least fun to watch.
That's exactly it.
And the same could be said for the Rebels. The Melbourne Rebels have been building. They're the next team in our list. Fourth team in our list. Their head coach Dave Wessel's now been in charge since 2017, and they've been getting more competitive.
The turning point, considering they had been in the years previous to that just perpetual get hammered guys, totally non-factor in Super Rugby as it was. Yeah, they've managed to they really benefited from the Western Force being axed, and they managed to grab a few of those players, but they've bolstered their squad over the last few years and have become quite a competent team.
Yeah, they were beneficiaries of the Force
axing
indeed. And since then, they have been going sort of from strength to strength, just improving year on year. Their captain Dane Hillett-Petty is a fine footballer,
always
player.
has been.
He's going to be keen to get back into Dave Rennie's mind and into the fighting once again for the starting berth in the Wallabies. He's been kind of in and out over the last couple of years.
That's right.
But he's a quality player. They've also got little Frank Lamani at Scrummy. He's the Fiji starter.
Fiji starting scrum half. That's a useful asset, all right, for good quick ball.
The key man for me on whom this team might hinge to look out for is EC Naisarani, because he's this Fijian import who's a Wallaby qualified test Wallaby who was just on the outside last year, and he actually put up class performances in the two Australia select teams that played Argentina.
Yes.
He actually managed to cause that Argentine defence more problems than arguably the All Blacks and Australia did in the Tri-Nations. He was running through them, he was scoring tries. He probably has a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He's 25 now and he's not getting the test look in.
Yeah.
And I feel like his form could go one of two ways. He could explode now. This could be his year. He's kind of peaking physically or getting close to that stage. Yeah. He could explode and force his way in and then bring the Rebels up with him.
Potentially.
Or he could sort of plateau and stay out of the mix, and it could be a frustrating year for him. And I'm very curious to see what he does. I feel like his form might be a litmus test for how this team goes.
Maybe so.
Although they do have other class players.
Some other players. I've seen Reese Hodge, Marika Korobetti, Matt Tamua. These are good, experienced international caliber players. That'll be vital for them in terms of how their season goes.
Yeah, curious to see if they put Reese Hodge at 10. They could, like a Dave Rennie directive could come down from a Wallaby point of view.
Yeah.
They do have James O'Connor, but Hodges was very much their backup 10 last year. So I'd be curious to see if they do that.
Tamua as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they have options.
Options is what they have, but they have good quality players, and they've been building a pretty decent team over the last few years. So watch out for the Rebels. And then finally, our favourite Wallaby team, or a favourite Australian
team.
The Western Force. The only team representing that whole hemisphere of Australia, which is why it was such a travesty to see them ousted from Super Rugby, and it's great. Conversely, it's just great to see them back.
It's the best silver lining from the pandemic, full stop. Is that we get the Western Force back. They were always my team when I started watching Super Rugby. Before they were axed cruelly. I always loved them. Matt Hodgson, the stalwart captain, who has now become director of rugby and seems to be making play after play even after retirement.
Yes.
Somehow he's still the every play man because he's brought in a rake load of new talent in the off season. They've been on a recruiting frenzy.
Well, to be honest, that is right and proper because they were in last season and they were comprehensively outmatched.
Well, they had to take part on short notice.
Yeah, that's right.
To make the competition happen.
Yeah.
And they had just a bunch of players who were playing in this rival league with different rules and 8-point tries.
Yeah.
And they had to come in and play these Super Rugby teams. It was definitely a culture shock, and they went. I think they were swept. They swept. They were swept. They didn't win a game. So that obviously needed to change. They didn't get rid of the coach, Tim Sampson. He's still there.
Yeah.
But now he has a decent squad to work with. They brought in, obviously, our national interest, Irish fullback Rob Kearney.
Yeah. Most decorated man in Irish rugby, so he is.
Yes.
All the trophies.
Yes. A rare thing, an Irishman with stacked trophy cabinet. Rob Kearney. Class fullback on his day, obviously getting on now, but I'm excited to see how he goes. He is named in the starting team
for this weekend.
At the very least, he should be solidity at the back. He should deal with the kicking
his
game.
high ball. He's an expert under the high ball. We've genuinely missed him. Ireland have got suddenly ropey without him, where he had been. He'd facilitated Ireland having 13 men in the defensive line because he covered so much space in the back line. So a veteran fullback is a useful acquisition for them. But he's not the only one.
No.
They've also got Argentinian. A quartet of Argentinians. They have Thomas Cabelli, quick little scrummy that he is, Thomas Lezana, Santiago Medrano, and Domingo Miotti.
Yes.
All internationals, all coming in and bolstering the force. And just that list alone, as well as like former All Black duo Richard Kahui and Jeremy Thrush.
Yeah, they were there last season.
They've
also got Tavita Kurandrani coming into the team.
Coming in. Tom Robertson as well on board. Inside centre to Carl Godwin. Yeah, there's a lot more quality in just on the team sheet than there was last year. That was a big concern going into week one, into game one last year, where we were like, really hope the Force go well. They do have like the best fans in Australian rugby by far. Like the noise out of their stadium, just the atmosphere, is fantastic. But you were looking at the team last year and going like, wait, who? What? How's this going to? Are they? At
they
the
were
level?
Caught, they were caught cold.
Yeah.
They were caught cold by the fact that they had to compete on short notice. But I'm expecting big things. I think we all are.
Yeah.
They've got like this. Yeah, they've got Godwin and Kurandrani in the centre starting. John O'Lance at 10 is going to have a bit of work to do. I'm surprised not to see Miotti in there straight away, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
John O'Lance was in there last year and didn't do much. But Lozano straight in the back row, Medrano straight in a tight head, Thrush still in there. There's actually a decent amount of quality in this team, so I'm excited to see.
Hopefully they'll be able to mix it with the guys now this time, as opposed to what we're hoping for is no sweep this year. We're hoping for progress from the Force and maybe a big scalp or two along the way.
100%. Listen, as far as the competition itself is concerned and what's likely to happen, the overall betting odds make the Brumbies favourites.
Champions Brumbies,
The Reds not too far behind them, almost a dead heat between those two.
Well, it's evens for the Brumbies and 9-5 for the Reds. So it's pretty close.
Almost a dead heat. Then you have way out Waratahs 7-1, Western Force and Rebels both at 10-1. Your best bet there might be the
Western Force.
Your best bet might be the Reds. Force could be a decent bet. For me, the Taz is a bad bet.
Yeah.
Because they're in third on reputation.
Yeah.
They finished fourth last year behind the Rebels. Western Force have imported loads of players. They haven't. They've lost players. Their captain, in fact. Yeah. So I don't see the Waratahs as a real threat.
Yeah.
Whereas the Force, if it all clicks for the Force, they could be in there. And likewise the Rebels, if Naisarani and the boys can just hit top
certainly
form.
10-1 is decent odds in a 5-horse race. So there's definitely value bets to be made. Brumbies at evens is the favourite for the reason, for good reason. We've been optimistic about a lot of Australian teams only for the Brumbies to be the last one standing, and that's been true in Super Rugby for the last few years.
Consistent good hustle out of them, and they are favourites for a reason, but that doesn't make them a good value bet. But
no,
they're up there, top team. Yeah, you got to hand it to them. The round one gets away. When you're watching this video, it'll probably be a matter of hours. Indeed, but it gets away this Friday morning our time, Friday evening, obviously local time out in Australia. The Reds play the Waratahs as the opening game. Queensland versus New South Wales.
Big rivalry.
That's going to be in Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane. 8:45 in the morning in our time, UK time, and 6:45 local time in the evening. That'll be followed immediately by the Force and the Brumbies, Western Force,
also
up against
Friday night game.
The champion Brumbies. That's going to be 11 o'clock local time and 7 o'clock at local time PM and 11 a.m. over here.
11 a.m. over here. Yeah,
that's good. Good double header of rugby on Friday morning.
To see it. And that'll be at HBV Park in Perth. Good to see rugby back in Perth.
Great to see rugby back in Perth. Yeah, absolutely. The only shame of it is the broadcasting issues that we're having over here. I mean, we're going to have to just go hunting.
Indeed,
with VPNs or other such.
Yeah, ordinarily Sky Sports have this rugby, but they haven't gone in. As of when we're filming this week, no one has bought the rights to Super Rugby
rights up for grabs. Although there is positive news in broadcasting domestically. I believe they've got a new broadcaster. I believe it might even be free to air. I'll have to double check that, but that's great locally if they've done that.
For the Aussie fans, it's good to get the eyeballs on, because it's been a concern.
It's big up rugby. They need people watching it.
Them having a domestic competition where there's guaranteed to be an Australian winner makes all the difference to that. Like it just makes a difference. There's competitive games, there's local rivalries, there's good offensive rugby, and it's just great. And then the prospect of a postseason against the Kiwis keeps that Tasman element alive. I think the new format's great, and looking forward to an exciting competition.
Absolutely, looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And we will pivot. Speaking of trans-Tasman things, we're going to pivot across the Tasman now and look at Super Rugby Aotearoa.
Super Rugby Aotearoa. Yes. We love a bit of Kiwi rugby.
We do.
Last year it was just the best club competition in rugby without exception. It was an extraordinary standard.
Did an international service to all of us affected by the virus and stuff by just putting on a great season of fantastic rugby. And if you haven't treated yourself, and now you're watching this show, of course you have, but if you haven't treated yourself to this competition, you need to find a way. They play blistering offensive rugby at a great tempo, really, really high standard. It functions as like a broader All Black trial, but there's sensational teams, wonderful team dynamics. They're building in some great defence and kicking hustle along with the usual offensive stuff. But what functions from it, the amount of just high quality players that are playing this high tempo rugby. The skills you see in this competition.
It just becomes as high a standard as club rugby gets. They drive the standards up so much. The Crusaders spearheading that, and it just like last year it was stunning. Like the Hurricanes or the Blues could have been European champions. They played such good rugby, and they couldn't in the end rein in the Crusaders. Just incredibly efficient, and awesome defenders and incredible on transition. And it was a simple formula for them, but the amount of class players in this competition, it's always
watering for the rugby tourists and for the neutral. It's a joy to watch. Brilliant spectacle throughout. And it was fantastic last year. Obviously, for the uninitiated, it features 5 teams, similar to Super Rugby AU. We have the Blues, who hail from Auckland, and their home ground is Eden Park. The Highlanders, representing from Otago, kind of Dunedin. Forsyth Bar is the stadium there, kind of indoor stadium, pretty cool. The Crusaders, who are Canterbury Crusaders, in Christchurch, and their stadium, Orange Theory Stadium. Which is formerly AMI Park, which is what I remember it as. I didn't realize Orange Theory, new sponsor for the year.
Originally Rugby League Park, but
that's right.
They rebranded, but it's the same nice stadium that they always have.
Yes. Then we have in Wellington, in the Cake Tin, your favourite stadium. That's where the Hurricanes ply their trade.
It's literally, the Cake Tin is the worst thing about Super Rugby.
It might be. It's a terrible stadium.
It's an awful stadium.
And then finally, the mighty Chiefs, who Daragh is representing this week. It can only go up from them. They play out of Waikato. It's the Waikato Chiefs. Real kind of Maori representatives, and
the hometown is Hamilton, but actually the
right.
Chiefs more than anybody tend to move around.
They do,
and play home games everywhere. In fact, they played a home game in Fiji in the pre-pandemic times.
That was right,
which is pretty cool. Likewise, the competition, like Super Rugby AU, it's going to go on for 10 rounds. Each side's going to play 8 games, home and away, against each other side.
Yeah.
After the 10-round regular season, they go straight to a final. They're not going to bother with the
semi-final.
With the semi-finals, given there's 5 teams, which, to be honest, Australians makes a bit more sense.
Yes.
It puts more stakes on the regular season.
Yeah.
Which I like. Last year they actually just went by league table, which was a shame because it didn't give any drama to the end of it. As soon as the Blues lost to the Crusaders, it was kind of done.
That's right.
And that was it. So it's great to have a final this time. It means that somebody will get a crack at Scott Robertson's team at the end of the season
in a clutch final match. Yeah, that should be exciting. This year the competition actually has adopted a few law changes in terms of they're going to do the goal line dropout for being held up over the line. They have that same 10-minute extra time with golden point rule as we were discussing.
They don't have the golden try, they just have the golden point.
They have golden point as it was last year in Super Rugby AU, so slight difference there. They and they have a captain's referral, which actually we didn't mention is in Super Rugby AU as well.
It's not captain's
referrals.
Referrals just brand new to this competition.
There you go. That's why we didn't mention it.
It's a brand new idea taken from other sports without any real thought, and the idea is that the captain is going to be allowed to refer any decision in the last 5 minutes of a game, but other than that it's going to be an infringement in the build-up to a try or foul play, which is what they do anyway. Which is why maybe for a moment like a knock on, but I thought they did this anyway. I thought if the captain said to a ref in good faith, mate, there's a knock on at the bottom of the ruck 2 phases back, you want to take a look, that refs would do that. Or
foul play. As soon as someone it's not just the captain.
There's an eye poke
I'm pretty sure anyone can allege foul play. They have to check it.
So I don't understand what this captain referral is, apart from this last 5 minutes thing, which means that they can just go anything, which just to me seems crazy because the amount of I can just picture a captain going, there was a side entry there, in that ruck 2 phases ago, and then the ref going, nope, captain's referral, I have to refer, and then all of a sudden you're in a TMO looking at the angle that a guy went in, and if it's not blatant it's just going to be mind melt watching it. So I actually don't like the idea of this. I thought it was already understood that if a captain spoke to the ref that you'd take a look at it within reason, not for side entries.
And do they have the one about the red card as well, or is that in
the red card? You can replace the guy who's carded after 20 minutes. It didn't come in last year. There were no red cards last year in Super Rugby AU as far as I know. But it's an interesting one. It sort of deals with a lot of grumbling that's going on in that part of the world about
where
red cards.
Across the Tasman, people are grumbling about red cards. What a red card is a red card. If it's a red card offence, the guy gets sent off.
I just don't subscribe to the notion that red cards ruin matches.
No,
because I've seen so many great matches take place post red card.
Yes, indeed.
It's not.
See, Scotland Wales last weekend for reference, or Ireland Wales even the week before. Like the red card didn't.
I know the team with the man up won the game, and that kind of it makes people annoyed. But it seems a suitable punishment. That's it. It's not a big deal. The 20 minutes with a man down and losing the guy for the rest of the match is enough of a disincentive to discourage the red card offence. But to me, it just feels like a superficial one. But if it stops the grumbling, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Listen, as before, we're going to just take a quick look at each of the 5 teams in the competition. I'm going to start, with the champions, the all-conquering Crusaders, Scott Robertson's team. They don't need really any introduction. You know who they are. We know who they are.
Champions of the first competition last year, and they won Super Rugby, the macro Super Rugby, in 2017, 2018 and 2019. So they're 4 years champions now, and they're just indomitable. And they play a very more structured style than you'll see from most Kiwi teams, but it's very detail oriented in terms of what their focus is on set piece, on defence. Their forward pack and defence are just huge differences between them and the rest of this competition in terms of their organisation.
I hate bringing these things up without being able to cite the source, because the person who did this deserves credit. I might find a way to put them in the description. But some stato guy put together the key differential that the Crusaders have, and they had basically a line in terms of the way teams execute in, you know, all sorts of areas: scrums, lineouts, attack from set piece, defense, exit, all these kind of things. And the key differential, the point where the Crusaders just went up in efficiency outside of the usual line on the graph, was their capacity to score from transition. Once they turn over the ball, their instincts are top notch. They work ridiculously hard to get into shape. They're encouraged as a team, and you know, Ronan O'Gara has spoken about sort of his time there as well. They do a lot of on-field thinking. They're active. The players are actively becoming coaches, and it's a big emphasis of Scott Robertson to get his players all thinking about the game and all contributing and making on-the-field decisions. And so they just have this wonderful telepathy and this wonderful attacking mindset once they're on turnover ball, that they just become ruthlessly efficient. Guys get into the right channels, they pick the perfect lines, they work ridiculously hard, they make great runs off the ball. And they've redefined the meaning of the word elite in club rugby in the last number of years.
And the meaning of the word dominant. I don't know if there's a more dominant force in rugby than the Crusaders down south. So like looking at that thing, like they were the final the year before they won it, and they've won every competition they've been in since 2017. So it's pretty mighty impressive, and it's tough to see. And like, we were hopeful for the Blues last year. They really did look a quality team that maybe they might upset them, but ultimately it ended up being another Crusaders year.
Because the Blues had them. They had their number. They were beating them up front, and then they just made this tremendous hustle play off a quick restart that changed the game, with Richie Mo'unga just kicking to himself and making his way down the field. They have the relentless belief that only a champion side can have, along with non-stop intelligent playmaking from the guys in the field. It's just a very tough thing to deal with.
And then when you look at some of the actual calibre of the players in themselves, that's part of what facilitated. So their captain is big All Black lock Scott Barrett, obviously a force to be reckoned with. But then you look through the other team sheet and you have Richie Mo'unga, as you said, Sevu Rees, Will Jordan, fantastic season last year, George Bridge, Jack Goodhue, David Havili, Cody Taylor, Sam Whitelock. My God, it could be an All Blacks team.
And you could go on like that. Those are just the standout All Blacks in the squad. They've got some phenomenal players. Like even Mitch Dunshee is a class operator. Like they Bryn Hall at scrum half, wonderful little halfback. Like they have endless talent, and would go into this competition as storming overwhelming favourites. As it always is. The second team that we're going to look at is the Blues, the Auckland Blues,
who were second last year, were they not? Or maybe they finished third.
They finished second. They finished second. They proved to be a very exciting team under Leon MacDonald with some excellent young talent.
A big coup was Beauden Barrett last year, switching allegiances and joining the Blues. He was playing a lot from fullback for them, and he looks, obviously add a Beauden Barrett to any team, they're going to be fantastic.
And it'll be a curiosity to see how they go without him, because he's still registered to them, I believe, but he is going to be playing in Japan this year, so that is obviously the big caveat to any predictions about them. He added a lot.
He did.
But they do have some fantastic talent. They play great industrious rugby. They pushed the Crusaders, and they did it not with Beauden Barrett necessarily, but with a competitive forward pack. I mean,
the guys like Tui Pilatu,
Captain Patrick is just awesome.
He's a monster.
Finally broke through last year and emerged.
We were wondering whether he would in time for the World Cup. Didn't quite happen, but last season really was phenomenal from him, and he was great for the All Blacks too. And then you have guys like Caleb Clark. And another guy needs no introduction. Fantastic. Broke onto the scene, the international scene, with the All Blacks, but that was on the foot of his great performance with the Blues beforehand in Super Rugby Aotearoa. And you have Rieko Ioane kidding out at 13 for them all season last year and looking devastating.
Revelatory.
Brilliant.
It really reignited his career, that switch, and he was awesome all year long, making defensive reads, making offensive plays. Key linchpin in that offense, and with the absence of Barrett just becomes more so.
And he's only half the Ioanes they have in there, because they have Akira Ioane as well. He's another phenom.
Akira Ioane as well. Like, he's a guy, he came into the All Black team toward the end last season, had a great game, I believe it was, in the last time out, but he's not far off breaking through himself. A
He
la
is.
Tui Pilotu.
Yeah.
He's a guy who's been coming up and not quite breaking through, and maybe there's a year coming
It's true.
where he puts it all together because he's got all the attributes.
He does. And then just a few others. Hoskins Tutu, one of the great breakthrough talents of last year. Dalton Papali'i, fantastic back row forward, dangerous. Ofa Tuangafasi, fantastic tight end, the best tight end in New Zealand by far. So their scrum is a monster. Their pack were dominant last year in most of the games they played. Look for them to strike off set piece, look for them to maul, look for them to kind of mix up things. They present a different picture to what you typically see in Kiwi rugby.
Going to be much more forward oriented, especially without Barrett.
Indeed.
I think crucial to seeing how they go is going to be what goes on at 10.
Ottery Black
he was
good
great last
season.
year. He made the step up. Stephen Perifetta is the other option. One or other of those guys needs to play really well if they're going to have a chance of mixing with the Crusaders.
Yeah, you'd think so. And the pack obviously will need to do a huge job if they're going to topple the Crusaders. But then we'll swivel on because the other team in it, we have a few other teams in it. The Hurricanes are the third choice on our list. I think they did finish third last season as well.
They did, yes. It's correctly ordered.
That's right, yeah. So the Canes, they still played with a lot of zest and a lot of tempo, even despite Bodie being annexed.
Yes.
And they were aggrieved at that at the beginning of the season, but they put together a nice team, a nice season all told, because they started pretty slowly, I think, last year, and then kind of built into the competition.
They were the only side to beat the Crusaders.
They were. There you go, which is a feather in the cap, because Crusaders don't lose many games at all.
No, indeed. They're actually in charge of them is a former 102 cap Munsterman who was in Munster for 8 years, Jason Holland.
There you go.
And his side, they continue to play just a great brand of rugby, led by captain Artie Sevilla. We all know about Artie. He's
playmaker supreme.
Yeah, one of the great players. Like, when I say this competition is stacked with talent, I'm not lying. Artie is just an awesome player. They're 2-time champions.
So there's pedigree in the club for sure, and they'll have belief they want to kick on.
And a lot of these guys will have won those comps as well back in, I believe it was 2014 and 2015. It was either 2014 and 2015 or 2015 and 2016.
Right,
but they had a couple of... Actually, might be wrong about that. The Highlanders win might have come in between their wins, but they had a couple of wins in short succession, and they were the best team with Bodie in there for a few years. But they still have a stack full of talent as well. They've got still TJ Perinara running the show from 9. You've got Jordy Barrett, Vince Asso, and Nyani Lamape have a very powerful combination in the midfield. Dane Cole's world class hooker, as we all know, via Fafita, is a guy who came into the All Black team a few years ago and looked ferocious, and it would be cool to see him get some great form back in that forward pack. And also Julian Sevilla returning to the fold.
Point of intrigue is first to venture back into Super Rugby. He had lost a bit of form before moving to Toulon,
he's the former pretty all-conquering performer in this competition, or at least in the Super Rugby, the macro Super Rugby of old. He was a key man in those title runs with the Hurricanes, and it would be class to see him back to his best as well. So it's just an exciting team.
Exciting team. They play a beautiful brand. Always good to watch them. Regardless of the opposition.
TJ is just a fantastic frenetic tempo setter for them. And he just gets them going. And they're just a beautiful team to watch with TJ at the helm, because he can just run a show, and they can set a tempo that just takes down defenses.
Terrify you.
And you look at the great Crusaders defense last year, how you can unlock that. Just a bit of TJ magic where you're just making the tempo relentless is a great way of doing it. And TJ is probably the best tempo setting 9, if not the best passing 9. That's because Aaron Smith is still in the mix as well, as we'll get onto with the Highlanders, who are going to next. But TJ Perinara for me is their key man still. Obviously Artie Sevilla as well in the pack is going to be crucial.
But without Bodie, it's become a bit more of an off 9 kind of thing. In terms of tempo. But definitely ones to watch out for, the Hurricanes. And then as you said, pivoting on to the Highlanders, who are a fantastic team, historical club. They produce Ben Smith, so I'm a huge Highlanders sympathizer. I think he's
Highlanders are easily one of the most likeable teams in all of Super Rugby. The fact that they finished 4th is just a reflective of how stacked this competition is, as I keep saying, because they're a really gritty class team in their own way. They're obviously former champions themselves a few years back, but they always show great hustle. They have great guile. They're tough, and they're a difficult side to play with. They've got a great home stadium in Forsyth Bar with the roof down and the college kids out. They actually managed to generate as good an atmosphere as anywhere in New Zealand. And they're coached this year by the great Tony Brown,
That's a game changer for them.
Yeah.
All right, that could be huge.
He was a pivotal part of that Jamie Joseph coaching ticket, I believe,
in
the
Japan.
World Cup.
Yeah.
And he's I might be wrong about that. He was in charge of the Sunwolves. He was with Jamie Joseph when the Highlanders won the competition way back when. I think he was part of that Japan team, but I'd have to double check.
Yeah.
But he's a great pedigree as a coach, great pedigree as a set piece play caller.
Yeah.
And if you look at the way the rugby was going in Europe, set piece attack is all the rage right now.
Yeah.
So I think him and his head coach could be transformative for this team.
Yeah.
They've got a couple of great players as captain and co-captain. Actually, they're joint co-captains, Aaron Smith and Ash Dixon.
Beautiful players.
Hooker and Nine. You know about Aaron Smith, but Ash Dixon is just a brilliant player as well.
Yeah, he's so lucky that you have the likes of Dane Coles and Cody Taylor ahead of him, because he would walk into a lot of international teams as captain, because he's just a fantastic guy. He's honest as the day is long, but a hustling machine from two. He's getting on a little bit now, but I still have serious faith in him. And then to bolster that pack as well, they brought in Japanese superstar number 8 Himeno.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Like last time I saw Himeno, he was tormenting Ireland in the World Cup. He is a force at number 8. And you've got him in there with Shannon Frizzell in that back row as well. Perry Parkinson was a class performer last year, and at lock he could make the step up this year and be tough to deal with. Liam Coltman is going to be in that back row as well. Liam Squire, actually, Coltman might have to take a back seat. Because Liam Squire is in there as well. You could have a back row of Squire, Frizzell, Himeno.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Tony Brown knows what he's doing, and Himeno is a shrewd acquisition. We'll get into this when we look at the odds at the end of it, but I think these are easily your best value bet. Because Aaron Smith is the best 9 in the world. I would still say on last year's form probably ahead of DuPont. Because he's that good, and that's not a disservice to DuPont. It's like, hello guys, Aaron Smith is that good. And the All Blacks were helped tremendously by him. He was keeping them alive really when their offense was struggling, just by bringing crisp passing with an immaculate tempo and a great offensive read on the game. And you've got guys like Milner Scudder. If he can get a bit of form and a bit of consistent
it's been a while since
fitness,
he's got a run of form, but we know how devastating he can be.
I just get the feeling that this team could be about to go off.
Mitch Hunt
and Josh Ioane are the two options at 10, and one of them is going to need to go well for them to compete, because it is tough without you can't do everything off 9. It would be nice to see them get a bit of back play on top of their forward hustle, but I think with those loose forward ball runners, there is capacity for them to get wide and break open teams.
Brown's making some interesting play calls. There could be space out wide for the likes of Milner Scudder.
Always a fantastic play caller is Tony Brown, and I'm very, very excited to see what his team can do. I think they might be the most exciting prospect in terms of unknown entities and potentially class entities the Highlanders this year. So one to watch for sure.
For sure. And then that finally leads us on to the team that sadly finished last, with Warren Gatland coaching them last year.
That's right.
No wins for the Chiefs last year.
They must have got a win, did they?
I don't think so.
They lost every game.
Is
that true?
I think so.
Oh, jeez, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Oh my god.
Gatland was winless last year.
I did see them lose a lot, but I must have thought they must have won once. Jeez. It's a tough competition when you're not playing well.
Yes.
The Chiefs, traditionally speaking, they are my favourite New Zealand franchise. They have a great sort of... they have a great cultural identity, and they always attacked with just relentless flair, they took Kiwi offensive football to just a whole other level. Like, rooks are generally speaking their enemy, set piece their enemy. Like, they want to get from one side of the field to the other and back again without any of that. No set piece, no rooks, just keep the ball alive, keep tempo going, keep running awesome tracking lines, tire teams out, the ball in play for minutes and minutes on end, with that end in a Chiefs try. They were just the iconic offensive team for so many years. They won Super Rugby back to back. I believe it was 2012 and 2013. And then they had a great run under Dave Rennie, building a nice team that couldn't quite best the Crusaders.
Just short, with the Crusaders being the one hiccup.
And then the Canes before them. The Chiefs were always nearly there after 2013 without ever actually doing it. And then they that Dave Rennie team fell away when Rennie left, and actually Kieran Keane, the backup coach, left, and Aaron Cruden left. and Liam Messon left, and then the endless amount of
gutted,
players who left.
In other words,
the club was just ridiculous. Charlie Ngatai, like they had a great team once upon a year, and they haven't ever got back to those heights really since. So it's on the interim head coach, the non-Warren Gatland coach, because Gatland's off allegedly doing Lions things. So they got this guy Clayton McMillan who's going to come in and lead the team and hopefully give a bit of freedom and a bit of
scarcely go worse than last year. So pressure's kind of off in that regard. But they need to find something. Obviously they do still have Sam Cane, All Blacks captain now. Useful weapon, and he missed the beginning of the season last year for them, and then when he came back in, it made a seismic difference. They were suddenly more competitive, albeit still losing, but like it was night and day in terms of just their grit and their hustle when he was on the pitch. So he's a huge asset for them. And then in the pack, they're a little light, but they have guys like Tupou Vai and Sawakula, who was really impressive last year.
Pretty quality last year, for sure.
Will need to step up, because besides that, they are a little bit light in the pack.
They got to move it quick. I mean, it's all about the backline talent that they have. I was talking earlier in the show about the scrum halves like Brad Weber and Tahuri. I hope I pronounced that right. Tahuri, I think, something along those lines.
A mouthful.
Those two guys are class scrum halves. I mean, Tahuri Arungi was injured for most of last year, so he didn't get a consistent run of form, and we know how good Brad Weber is. So they could be driving an awesome tempo from 9 themselves.
Bryn Gatland in at 10 as well.
Bryn Gatland is a good option for them, but they've got like decent players out wide as well. Sean Wainui, Sean Stevenson, Anton Linnert-Brown in the midfield is going to be key for them. He needs to rediscover some form.
He does.
He needs to not be running silly crash balls like he was last year.
All of last year, he spent his time running the Jamie Roberts line, and it's like he's not Jamie Roberts.
It hurt him from an All Blacks point of view as well. So we'd be excited to see the Chiefs throw the ball around a bit more. And of course, the linchpin of it all is Damien McKenzie, who is Mr.
D-Mac at fullback,
Mr. Chiefs,
and Mr. Transition. He's vital to their chances. If you get a high flying Chiefs team with Damien McKenzie getting his hands on the ball in space in the 15 metre channel,
playing 10. I don't want to trust Bryn Gatland. Don't put him at 10, because he's not a 10, and it hurts when he's at 10 because you don't have him at fullback in the wide channels.
It's true,
which is where you need him. The Chiefs need to be wide outside of teams.
He needs to be linking with Wainui and the like out there, rather than trying to put Anton Linnert-Brown into a Jamie Roberts crash ball.
Exactly.
Like, that would be an ugly look for the Chiefs.
You don't need to see him kicking the leather off the ball either. This team needs to be about attack, because they are not as stacked as the other teams in terms of top talent. And every game is a nightmare. Every game is a tough game at this level. So they have to be quick. They have to be offensive, and they have to get some wins.
And they have to get some wins, of course. But they are coming in bottom of the pack. Just in terms of betting odds, I suppose, for it. Your favourites, no prizes for guessing who are the betting favourites. It's the Crusaders.
Yes,
sitting at 5-6, almost even money. It's it's tough to see past the Crusaders given the calibre of them and their recent record. So they are obviously coming in at favourites. Second, we have the Blues at 9-2. Decent show, maybe.
That's on form from last year, but they are a Barrettless Blues.
So maybe not. Maybe not this year. Maybe last year was their chance to out.
That's kind of what I feel, but they do still have probably on paper the best pack in the competition, because they've got some just explosive players in that forward pack.
They do. So they'll be able to mix it with anyone, and they'll probably win a fair few games. They'll be good enough for second or third.
They'll be there.
Could be making the final. Then third, we have the Hurricanes at 5-1. Decent shout there. I think the Hurricanes at 5-1 is decent, and then the Highlanders at 6-1.
That's my bet.
That could be a bet.
That's my bet for
a fresh coaching ticket, a fresh outlook, but some of the same
Tony Brown was in as assistant coach last year, and they always had great hustle about them. But I want to see what he can do as head of the helm, because I've always rated him as a coach. I had my eye on him for a number of years, because when Joe Schmidt originally left Leinster way back in 2013, Tony Brown was actually tipped as a potential
Leinster coach.
Potential left field option.
There
was a rumour going around that he might be given the job, and it didn't in the end. But I've had my eye on him ever since, and he's been going from strength to strength.
Nothing but impressive.
A hallmark of his stuff is this class play calling and this class play design off set piece. And if you're watching the Six Nations, any Kiwi fans out there, like the way that rugby has moved from last year being very, very defensive, this year the response to the defence has been very set piece oriented. And so it could just be a marrying of worlds where he gets to open teams up. I'm just really, really excited to see what he can do with his full A full head coach, hands on the reins,
and he's inheriting a club with a great ethos and a great hustle, albeit a year that didn't quite go their way last year. They finished fourth, but they're not that far away.
They aren't, and adding Jimeno to that just makes them. They could easily go on a run. They could easily go on a run to the final. It's not that between the Blues, the Canes, and the Highlanders. There's not that much there, and I definitely do feel that
6-1 could be good odds, and then finally 7-1 the Chiefs. That feels like a poor bet, to be honest.
They're not going to do it. They don't have the same talent. They do have Damien McKenzie, but outside of that, they don't have.
Maybe if you were offering me 15-1, I'd stick the punt on it. But at 7-1, it seems just unlikely and a silly bet, to be honest.
They are a great team, and I'd love to see them go back to throwing the ball around. I don't see them really competing with these top sides because they don't have the same. They don't like the Crusaders and the Blues just on that pack strength alone. And then now the Highlanders with that incredible back row talent. It's just going to be very, very tough for them to compete physically.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So they need to find some way of unpicking those guys. And being the helter-skelter barbarian style of rugby is a great thing, a great look to bring anyway. But they're desperate for a win. They need to get some winning culture returned before they even increased their caliber, because last season was a disaster for them.
With that, we're just going to look at the first round is going to kick off next Friday. That's
Friday week,
Friday 26th of February. It's going to be between the Highlanders and the Crusaders to get us off. That's a great start. Forsyth Bar, always a buzz, and you have the Highlanders, who are my theoretical pretenders to the throne of the Crusaders, who are the all-conquering champions, and it'll be a great litmus test of a game to start. It'll just be a wonderful game to start the season. That'll be at 6:05 in the morning our time, 7:05 local time. And then, as if it weren't enough of a meal of a game to start the season, we go on to the Hurricanes against the Blues, which is second against third from last year. Just another great
really
game.
Competitive match. Could go either way. Definitely going to be exciting footy. We have razzle dazzle from the Canes versus muscle from the Blues potentially, or it could look something different. You don't know, because they're both very broad. They're very well rounded teams, and they're quite evenly matched. So that's definitely going to be a banger. It's on at the same time, same kickoff time, but it's on Saturday, and it's going to be at Sky Stadium in Wellington. That's going to be exciting.
The cake tin. Yes, that's the negative. But
he does not like the cake tin.
Who likes the cake tin? It's a cricket ground. It looks ridiculous. It never there can be great crowds in there, and it never looks full because they're miles away from the stadium and sitting in those yellow seats with the weird wind spinning. It's no good.
He does not like the cake tin at all.
Also, Wales beat Ireland there in 2011 in the World Cup.
Oh yeah, that's true too. So all kinds of reasons for not liking the cake tin. Whereas Forsyth Bar, fantastic.
Forsyth Bar, awesome.
Friday night at Forsyth Bar. Yeah, that sounds like the place to be. But we'll be here, locked down.
Yeah, regardless of stadium critiques, it's just going to be a fantastic tournament, and I'm hoping, touching wood, that the broadcasters managed to put together something for us over here in this part of the world.
Someone should pick it up, because
we're deprived.
We're going to
have to be bootlegging or doing VPN stuff, and mad subscriptions and all sorts of hustle may have to be done for us to get a chance to watch these games.
Whereas it used to be just record. What is it? 6 a.m. kickoff, record.
Yeah, I know. It sucks. It does suck. But if there was ever something worth waking up at 6 a.m. for, it might be these games, because they are just fantastic to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So Super Rugby kicking off in both Australia and New Zealand in the weeks to come. That is definitely exciting news as far as club rugby is concerned.
For sure.
Sticking with club rugby, we're just going to pivot back up to Europe briefly and kind of touch base, as we do, with the domestic competitions up here. Exeter continue to push Bristol at the top of the table. Bristol are still sitting atop the table in the Premiership in the UK. Still playing some exciting.
Good win over Gloucester, just about.
They got an ill-deserved win against Gloucester. Gloucester managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory again, and they escaped with the points. But Exeter are breathing down their necks. And
there was an important win for Bristol, because they're in this period without Ranraja at the moment,
and they're missing their internationals as well. So it's tough. It's tough for them.
Yeah, but to be clinging on and getting the win is massive, and is crucial. Just to be in a situation where they can stick it with Exeter once the Six Nations.
It's still looking like a 3-horse race. With Sarries out of the picture, it looks like Bristol someone of Bristol, Exeter and Sale will likely be lifting the trophy at the end of it all. I think Quins are currently in fourth, and there's London Irish and a few others are scrambling, Northampton as well, scrambling for fourth, but there does look to be a gulf in class, and the points are reflecting that as well. It feels like those three are the teams that are in the mix.
Very much so.
And on the other end, Gloucester's woes just continue, and they really need to start winning some games soon, because otherwise they'll be going down.
The stats for Gloucester, I mean, they played, I think, 10 games and won 1. But they have actually ratcheted up a load of losing bonus points.
They need to start winning some of these tight games.
They have more points accrued by bonus points than by the 4 points for their win.
Yeah, so
it's kind of a curiosity.
It's been close but no cigar a lot of the time. And that's just it goes to clutch, I suppose, and bottle, and the momentum as well, because it's not going Gloucester's way. And then swivelling over to France in the top 14, Toulouse have just nipped ahead of La Rochelle and Racing at the top. But it's very tight up there between those three, and like quality attacking footy is the narrative from France. It's good to see these great teams being the ones leading the dance, where it used to be a bit more of a muscly, bit more of a slow bludgeoning thing in years gone by. Now it feels like it's free flowing, much like the French national team. A lot of exciting rugby and the right teams.
Yeah, it's reflective of it. The French are figuring it out. In the Pro 14, they had their 2 games from last weekend rescheduled due to bad weather.
That's kind of nice, you know. There was no COVID. It was just rubbish weather. That's more normal. That could have happened in normal times.
Yes, indeed. Well, it actually kind of sucks, but
I know.
It's just another way to have games cancelled.
That's true too.
It's unfortunate. Actually, Holly Davidson, the Scottish ref, was going to have to wait to make her refereeing debut because she missed out on one of those games from last week. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
There are, however, games this weekend when the weather is to be more palatable. I think Glasgow and Ulster, Edinburgh and Munster, and Connacht Cardiff are definitely the big fixtures this week, the marquee ones that might yield some class games, but the dynamics at the top of the table remain the same. Leinster, Ulster and Munster strongly ahead, and with the condensed format, it'll just be it'll be a final between the top of each conference, so Leinster or Ulster will probably play Munster in the final once this season wraps up. Given there's no promotion relegation, European qualification is the only other dynamic going on, so the Pro 14 trundles on without too much in the way of consequence for most of the teams.
Waiting for the Safas is essentially what it's doing. It's on ice. But we will swivel on then, sticking with club rugby, but pivoting on to Japan, where Japanese top league, it gets underway this weekend as well. And not dissimilar to the Pro 14, it's 16 teams divided into 2 conferences of 8.
Yes.
So that's kind of the structure of it. And it's going to be a single round robin tournament in terms of how the standings go.
Each division is going to have a round robin tournament internally within itself. Then a playoff gets played by 20 teams ordered in that way, so it's still the same number of teams, with 4 teams coming from the second division into like a massive postseason. So there's like 75 matches in total in the competition, 56 regular season matches, and then the remainder 19 postseason games. I mean, there's a lot of teams in it. I rarely get a chance to watch it, but it tends to bring just a wonderful balance of like class players who you'd forgotten about, and then class players who you know about, like your Bowden Barretts and your Michael Hoopers, and then they're mixed in with some awesome young Japanese talent, the makings of the whole Japanese team, all of those class players, and married with a bunch of superstars from all around the globe. I mean, just to pick a few out who'll be playing, there's Bowden Barrett, George Cruz is over there now, Alex Good, Michael Hooper, Ryan Crotty, Hadley Parks, Bernard Foley. That's just to name a few.
Brody Retallick's still out there, I think, is he?
He might well be. I mean, it's the guys over there. The talent is unreal. Some of the highlights are great. We don't get a chance to see many of the games over here. They're at an awkward hour. But some of the highlights should be up on YouTube and available for people to watch. And broadcast is going to vary depending on where you're watching this from. But getting just an eye in on some of the class games, it might be. If you're into it, it's a good way to watch rugby, because they play a fun brand, and there's some big names in there. So if you're feeling nostalgic, some of the guys you miss are playing rugby in Japan.
That's true. And it's also it's great to see that there's that amount of money in the domestic competition somewhere in the world, like Japan going force. They just got their tier 1 status partly hugely because of their World Cup showing over the last World Cup and the previous one as well, beating the Springboks. It's been a long time coming, but this league, it's even though you don't get to see as much of it, it's very important that it's out there, and it's hugely helpful for the game as a whole, because it just creates more money for it. Like it's a trope in there that it's like the Panasonic wine lights and stuff. There's a lot of corporate backing that goes into this tournament, and it does things like give Tongan players a path into professionalism. It helps a lot of South Sea Islanders, and there's a branch into Japan, as well as feeding Japanese rugby. It's just a great product all told, and I think it's a really, really good league to keep abreast of. We'll try our best to keep abreast of it and keep the updates going. As you said, it is tough to see because of the hours and such, but it's just I'm a big fan.
Yes, absolutely is. So that's even more rugby going on across the world. There's lots of rugby happening. Broadcast some of it over here, please, broadcasters.
Yes, indeed.
Broadcasting
even
in sport.
Just flip it on Facebook or YouTube or something.
Yeah, broadcasting in sport is an absolute mess, and rugby is getting worse at it. And it's a rant we need to have perhaps on another day. But I mean, geez, if they were trying to hide the sport, they couldn't be doing a better job.
That's true.
Let's hope the highlights that Rugby Pass or whoever it is can put out for us are generous enough that we can get a feel for games and see some good rugby, because we're very much at their mercy.
Did you ask for 2-minute highlights?
Yeah, indeed.
Here you go.
That's
6 3-pointers.
Very often what you get. Yeah. or just like the end of a try.
Yeah.
Just see a winger running in.
Yeah.
Who passed it to him? I don't know. But
there's the try. He grounded it.
Yeah.
Try.
Let's
that is a rant for a different day.
Let's hope we can see some of it. But yeah, important to note, it is getting underway this week, and it's another top level domestic competition.
That's right. So yeah, with that we will swivel on to the final segment of the show, which is the rugby news of the week, as is tradition here.
Yes.
And we have a few little tidbits.
Yeah, the first story that we're going to look at is this big story that's developing around the Club Rugby World Cup, which is this idea that Bernard Laporte has, among others. But it seems to be coming together in a kind of a big way. Like it's they're going to present it to World Rugby. They've got the plan coming together. This is according to Midi Olympique, who had the story this week.
Right.
Like last year, he had floated the idea of the World Cup. The idea would be the teams from the top 14, the Premiership, Super Rugby, the Pro 14, the top league that we were just talking about in Japan, Major League Rugby, perhaps.
Saru, perhaps.
Whatever
it is, Slar.
I don't think there'll be Slar teams in it for the time being. But Major League Rugby might get a team just so they can get whooped and experience what top level club rugby is.
Maybe so, yeah.
That would be the effect. But yeah, it's this romantic idea people have had, like the idea of the Crusaders coming down and playing some of the top European teams is appealing to some. It wasn't one that had been exceptionally on my own mind, because I was kind of thinking, geez, where do you fit it in with the calendar?
Yeah.
But it's just one of these things where there's money involved, people are excited about it, the head of the Japanese top league has agreed to it. The new development apparently is that the EPCR are on board.
There you go. So it seems like wheels are in motion, all right.
Wheels do seem to be in motion, and the idea would be for the first one to take place next year in lieu of a Champions Cup, so there wouldn't be a Champions Cup next year.
See, that is where you lose me.
Yeah,
because the Champions Cup's the best club competition in the world.
To my mind it is, except they're saying this will be even better, and that's their idea, is that you're going to get, the regular season of the Pro 14 with the South African team, so it'll be a little better from a selfish Irish point of view.
Yeah.
You will have some regular season competition, but that'll wrap up relatively early, and then around the time Super Rugby starts next year, you'll have all of these teams converging into one competition, suspending their domestic play for this competition where we're all playing each other, and Leinster all of a sudden playing the Crusaders, etc, etc, etc. Big idea. Sounds expensive for travel reasons and other things. And do you play it in a neutral venue? Are you going to get the crowds if you do that, or do you have the Crusaders fly to Europe for a tour and then?
How do you format the tournament? How many teams are allowed in?
That'll be stuff that'll be figured out. But I mean,
let everyone in.
From a logistics point of view, it has to be figured out. But that's it. It seems to be something that you can be skeptical of, but the wheels seem to be coming together.
I know. I'll watch it. It may happen, and it'll be a great event. What I would say is what are you doing sacrificing the Champions Cup to accommodate it? Because the Champions Cup is a great product.
How else can you play it?
I agree with that. I know, but it's there's no guarantee of return, and it's going to be the same thing it has been, where it's we'll sell this amount of the thing and hopefully we'll get X amount of monies, and it's no, I don't think so.
This is an idea that's fueled in no small part by the CVC guys who are buying up all these leagues.
Yeah.
They definitely have a mind towards it. It has to be, it has to be.
Trust the venture capitalists. They always have the good of the game in mind.
It does have to be well considered, and it does. There is a factor of devaluing the Champions Cup. It's definitely a thought, and what you have to bring in now, it would take place crucially only once every 4 years. Yeah. So there would be a Champions Cup in the other 3 years.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
It's not ending the Champions Cup. It's just meaning 1 out of every 4 years you don't have it. And then the question is, how do you do it? That's what they need to present next. And the Midi Olympique has the story that they're going to be presenting it. What the story we need to hear is exactly how it's going to work, and then we can sort of pick: is this actually possible? Are you going to get the crowds you think you're going to get to have? How are you working the travel situation? All of that. Because if the idea is to have all the teams travel, it just sounds like a logistical nightmare. And if the idea is to play them all in one location, it sounds like it's not the financial best idea in the world, because the Champions Cup, for if you're a team like Leinster, yields 52,000 crowds on a couple of occasions a year.
And trips to wherever, Marseille or Newcastle and stuff, and that's the risk with all of these grandiose ideas that I think is just you're going to rip up what's really good and working just to try
there's wonderful dynamics in European rugby of going to France, and there's traditions that have been forged already, important traditions where fans really love and respect the competition. I certainly know if this emerged as a story in and of itself, that the club competition, a Club World Cup, is going to replace the Champions Cup, and it's going to be in Hong Kong. That would be, all fans in Europe would be disgusted by that. And I think I would be on board with them in terms of the game is still the game, and you're just trying to create this TV event that's not going to be as big as you think it is to try and make a quick buck, and actually you're just robbing the heart of the game away from the fans. And it's stupid, that is the risk, but that's not necessarily what it's going to be.
No, I know, but that is the caveat I'll attach, is that you're not guaranteed, just because you say Club World Cup, you're not guaranteed the millions or squillions that they may be projecting in the plans. And it's like, well, maybe a bit more realism might kind do no harm indeed. But it's still an exciting prospect, and I'm curious to see what they propose, and it is definitely the main story coming out this week. In other news, and actually very positive news, I was delighted because we've been over to Murrayfield to see an Edinburgh game before, but Edinburgh and Scotland Rugby are delighted to announce that they've completed their brand spanking new 7,800 fan seater with a 3G surface, brand new stadium right around the corner from Murrayfield itself. So it's a Murrayfield stoop, essentially.
Murrayfield is like looming over the field, but it's a cool little small ground.
That's great. It's exactly what Edinburgh have needed forever, and it's actually the first time I was reading it. It's the first time since either the club's inception as a professional side in 1996 or as an amateur rugby district in 1872. This is the first time they'll have a permanent home of their own, which is crazy to think. And it was always a bugbear of all of us, is that well, it's like we often tease the South African sides for doing it as well. It's like, if you're getting 8,000 or whatever, even 20,000 guys or fans regularly to your home games, you should have an 8,000 seater or a 20,000 seater to house them. What you shouldn't do is squeeze throw 8,000 fans into a 60,000 seater and have them all spaced out, because there's just no atmosphere when you do that. You're better off in a smaller, more compact space. Now, not in COVID times. In COVID times, it might be perfect to have a big, massive stadium and let some people in. But it seems like the right size.
COVID tends to make everything that's right wrong and everything that's
Indeed.
wrong right.
Yeah, exactly. And for the longest time, Edinburgh have been playing their home games in Murrayfield with a decent crowd of around 6,000 or 7,000 for a lot of the big games, and they're just lost in a cavernous stadium with no atmosphere, and that's horrendous. Whereas this now should change that for the better.
It should, for sure. On other news, there was a couple of signing bits and bobs. The Argentinian scrummy Gonzalo Bertrand, who was going to play with the Dragons until the end of the season. Interesting tidbit.
Yes.
He's a class little player. Good to see him
getting
some rugby somewhere.
For sure, yeah.
Teddy Thomas, the French superstar winger, could potentially be in line for a blockbuster transfer to Toulouse from Racing.
That would be a coup.
Apparently, Racing have told him that they don't want him after the end of the season, which is a curiosity.
That is madness.
Would make you wonder about the financials over there, because he's a class player still in his prime, and if Toulouse could poach him, like Colby on one wing, Thomas on the other, Stop. It's just crazy.
Yes. The fear of Toulouse and the admiration of Toulouse are both very alive and well in our minds.
Yes, indeed. And listen, we'll just wrap up this long show with a positive story from the women's game. The RFU have agreed, after a bit of pressure, to double the salary cap for the Premier 15s in the women's game.
Excellent news.
Now listen, they had proposed 60,000 as a salary cap for a team, £60,000. It's now going to be £120,000.
Still on a smaller scale.
You're talking about a salary for a bunch of players. I don't quite know how that works, but it doesn't seem like that's enough for a squad to live off. But it just shows the growing, a steady, slow growth of investment in the women's game, where it's gradually improving, and the Premier 15s is still a great competition. It's getting professional players, more and more playing professional rugby, more and more of them doing it for a living. It's potential now that the Premier 15s becomes sort of the hub of talent for women's rugby, and becomes,
it certainly is. From an Irish perspective, it's the only few professionals who are
from
in
an Irish perspective.
No, it's not.
There's a lot of professional players from all around USA, Canada.
Yeah.
Coming to Premier 15s to play rugby, and it has the potential to become the elite women's rugby competition for the time being anyway.
We look like it's great. The RFU are doing a great job with the women's game for sure, and this is more positive news, but they are doing everything that they can to grow the women's game. It doesn't have the same eyeballs as the men's game, but that doesn't stop you from making efforts to change that, and the RFU are doing that, and it's to their credit.
It would be great to see them getting broadcast in times to come, and getting eyeballs on them. There was a class, I'm not sure if you saw, there was a class try scored by Bristol in their win over Sale in the Premier 15s last week. I was a loose head prop on the right wing, doing like a 60-metre run, busting through a bunch of defenders, and now she just looked phenomenal. I wish I could remember her name. Simi Pam, I believe, if I'm right in saying. She was just a phenomenal runner, but she looked like she could play 8 or right wing or wherever she wants. She was Joan Lomoing the girls around her and scored just an awesome try.
Excellent.
There's some good highlights coming out of Premier 15s rugby, and it's definitely a watcher. Hopefully women's game can arrive at elite domestic league would be a great way for it to get its legs as a professional sport.
Exactly. So all of that is good news. And I suppose with that we will wrap up the show. It was another long one. It was an off week, so we don't have any Six Nations or internationals really to preview, but it was nice to get a look into the Super Rugby Aotearoa and AU, preview both of them as we did, because obviously we will be pivoting back into the Six Nations next week.
In a major way.
Looking ahead to the game, all the 3 games to come in round 3. For the time being, we're going to wrap up there. If you did enjoy the show, or you do enjoy the long form rugby content that we're producing, please do feel free to like and subscribe down below. Also, do leave a comment as well if you have any opinions, if you disagree with anything you said, or just any tidbits of your own on the game. Please do drop it in the comment section down below. We do read them. We enjoy hearing your thoughts on the game, and we do value getting a good kind of level of discourse going in our comment thread. We're very proud of that, and hope you continue doing so.
Absolutely. Be sure to leave your thoughts. Any thoughts or suggestions on topics you want us to cover, absolutely pop them down as well. But listen, without any more ado, given we've talked the ear off you, no doubt, thanks so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one for the next round of the Six Nations.
That's right. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Now I've got to give it a little less zip than I have been. That was too little zip.
You threw it under.
I threw it with no zip.
No zip at all.
That was exactly the wrong approach.
I have to avoid the light here. I don't know how to... Hey!
That's how. Just like that.